long list of examples of showing that when we get to the next budget cycle year that begins September 1 of this year, it means that we should be well positioned, as we have in the past, with a very robust economy. Some people are predicting an even faster growing economy in 2021 and 2022 than what we've seen in a long, long time. And so I think that we have tools and strategies to deal with budgetary challenges as a result of 2020. But for the next 2-year cycle, we should be looking to be in great shape.
Mr. Governor, obviously there is a well-concerted effort to a coordinated effort in the urban counties, Tarrant County, Dallas County, in administering the vaccines. What about in some of the more rural counties who may not have as many resources as the urban counties? How is the state going to be helping those more rural counties?
In multiple ways. First, you heard County Judge Glenn Whitley explain a strategy that is extremely effective. The county judge for Tarrant County is not just working to provide vaccinations for people in Tarrant County. He's working with the Texas Division of Emergency Management and the State Department of Health Services to work, is it 12 counties?
10 counties right now.
10 counties in the surrounding area, he pretty much all of which would be considered to be rural counties, to make sure that they will be benefiting from the strategies they have and make sure that they will be vaccinated. Separate from that, remember what I said earlier, and that is, in addition to these large hubs that we have now set up, this week alone, there will be providers in 104 counties across the state of Texas, most of which will be in the mid to small/rural style counties that will be making sure that they will have vaccinations available for the people in their counties. And then on top of that, in counties that don't fall into those 104, many of those counties still have vaccines available to them to continue to provide to their residents. And importantly, like I said, residents in all 254 counties have received vaccines, and they will continue to receive those vaccines.
Is there confusion? Can anyone sign up for one of these big hubs with, outside of Parler County? Can they sign up for Tarrant County?
So I have an answer to that. However, I think it would be better for me to turn it over to the people who are running this, and if I don't feel like they've covered it, I'll be happy to chime in.
What I would say is, at this point in time, we've had people from Dallas, Denton, Tarrant, or Collin County who have registered and who have come here and got shots. Specifically right now, we are targeting those smaller counties. Dallas County is open to spot today. Denton County is starting off with a mobile site, I believe, tomorrow. Not sure exactly what Collin County has done, but again, what I've done is to try to reach out to those smaller counties that, just as the governor has said, are a little bit more challenged as far as being able to set up a site. We'll get the vaccine out to them, or we'll invite them here in the beginning, and then eventually we hope we'll be able to go out to them and actually administer the vaccines within their area.
So let me just tell you this fact, and that is, a Texan is not limited to getting a vaccine only in the county in which they live. A Texan is capable and able to receive a vaccine in any county in the state of Texas. We do want to make it as convenient as possible for all Texans by making vaccines available as close as possible to where they live, which is why we have achieved vaccinations in all 254 counties. That said, if someone wants to come to Tarrant County or to Dallas County or some other county to get a vaccine, they are able to do so.
We know they'd much rather come to Tarrant County, Governor.
To President Trump's suspension from Twitter, and do you believe that he has recently incited any violence?
So first, with regard to the violence always obviously is unacceptable. But the people responsible for the violence are the people who did it, and they're the ones who should be punished for it. With regard to what is happening on social media, listen, typically any company has the right to make whatever decisions they wanted to with regard to who may use their product. However, what we have in some social media companies is different because they have been given a unique grant of civil liability immunity to maintain an open platform. And it seems like they are no longer complying with the open platform that allows them to receive the civil liability immunity. They cannot have it both ways. They cannot cancel conservative speech while still receiving that immunity. They're going to have to pick or choose which pathway they go down.
Governor, should President Trump resign? What do you think?
He's in office, what, another week? Listen, all the political machinations in Washington, D.C. About the last few days of his presidency are nothing more than political machinations. What Americans want to see out of the United States Congress, they want to see action. They want to see the United States Congress step it up and doing everything they can to provide more vaccines and make them available for people in Texas. We don't need them to do political infighting. They should be working every minute of every day, coming up with strategies that will create more vaccines for Texans and for Americans.
All right, thank you, President. No questions. Thank you.
All right, so that was the update there from Governor Greg Abbott in Texas at the end, talking about Twitter as well as the riots that happened last week in the Capitol. Let's now take you out to Tampa right now, where a little bit later here on News Now from Fox in the afternoon, we will have a live update here on the court appearance that is being known as the lectern guy on social media. The suspect in the U.S. Capitol riot making a federal court appearance in Tampa today. We're talking about Adam Johnson right here. And this is the latest that we are learning today on Adam, who is 36 years old, making his first federal court appearance. Federal officials said Johnson was caught on camera holding House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's lectern. They said after Getty Images shared a now viral photo of Johnson, social media played a role in identifying him leading up to his arrest on Friday night. At first, he was mistakenly identified by some social media users as via Getty based on a misinterpretation of the photo caption, but a former parishioner from his church told Fox 13 that she immediately knew who he was there. So we will get a live report here from all of the happenings that took place in federal court. That's a little bit later here on News Now from Fox. You'll have that right here. News Now from Fox. All right, let's take a quick 2-minute break for some of you. When we come back, we'll take you out to and keep you in Tampa, where a sheriff's office is talking about a major bust in child trafficking.
And the supervisors and management, thank you. I know this was a tough operation. It always is, working through the holidays, working in the cooler weather, and working under the conditions that you guys work under, especially with the COVID outbreak and still being as tenacious as you are. Let me just give you a tremendous thank you on behalf of all of us. Well, thank you for being here. January is National Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And today, January 11th, is National Human Trafficking Awareness Day. It only seems fitting that we announce the end of an extensive, month-long operation focusing on finding individuals who seek to buy another person for sex. Operation Interception is one of many proactive approaches we have taken over the last 2 years in preparation of Super Bowl 55. With less than a month away from the big game, our covert operations continue and will continue, seeking those who choose to sexually exploit others here in our community. The name of this operation just isn't a catchy football moniker. Our goal, as the operation name explains, is to intercept those involved in sexual exploitation before they're able to take advantage of the vulnerable individuals in our community, and ultimately, hopefully, deter others. Like any major sporting event, the Super Bowl should not be a venue where these types of crimes occur on the sidelines, whether it's before the game, during the game, or after the game. To make that message clear, during Operation Interception, our undercover detectives posted online ads offering to meet up, making themselves available for the purchase of sex. And our female detectives posed as prostitutes on the streets. This combined approach attracted the 71 Johns, or sex buyers, you see pictured beside me. and they come from a variety of backgrounds. Among them are active duty military, a banker, Christian school teacher, firefighter, construction workers, and local business owners. Two of our suspects, Daryl Robinson and John Tu, are already registered sex predators. All of these men have one thing in common. They did not care if the women they were going to have sex with were being exploited or forced to sell their bodies against their will. The reality is, no one willingly chooses to enter the world of sexual exploitation. In fact, we have found that in many cases, these individuals suffer from some type of victimization of rape or suffer from some type of substance abuse, which is why targeting the demand and freeing these vulnerable individuals from this despicable underworld is vital to eradicating human trafficking in our community. We are just a few weeks away from Super Bowl 55, and the massive majority of visitors who plan to visit our county will be here to simply enjoy the game. However, we know from past experiences with major sporting events, there will be some who travel for the exclusive purpose of taking advantage of women and children. I want to make it very clear. If you are planning on engaging in the sexual exploitation of others, I'm urging you to think twice. We will find you. We will arrest you. Now I'll take any questions anyone may have in regards to our operation.
That's a lot of people. How mad does this make you that this is still going on?
It's extremely concerning. I will tell you that our detectives, when they post these online ads in the social media avenues that that this type of activity occurs, they've talked to hundreds of people. These are the 71 individuals who showed up, but they've made contact, had telephone contact with hundreds of individuals. So when you talk about the concern of the 71 individuals that showed up and were placed under arrest, I'm extremely concerned and extremely bothered by the fact that the demand is still so great here in Tampa.
You know, with the Super Bowl coming up, can you explain again, why that seems to drive up demand for these sort of things?
Sometimes it's just the sheer volume of people visiting here. And again, then you have some people, the sole purpose of coming here is to traffic women and children. Some will bring their own women and children. Some will come here seeking to victimize our community. And that's just for the sheer volume of numbers. And again, it all goes back. When you talk about eradicating human trafficking, it all comes back to the demand. And that's why all of our operations have been focused on eradicating the demand, removing the demand. And again, this is just one small piece of what we're doing right now is the enforcement part. That's our job. But we've also made an extremely concerted effort in the prevention side, prevention through education, teaching our county employees on the identifying symptoms of someone suffering or someone that's engaged or someone is being trafficked. Whether it's the hospitality industry, the rideshare industry, our county employees, we've educated our own workforce here. Been doing a ton to make sure that we're educating airport employees, everything, again, to make sure we're diminishing the demand as we prepare for the game. But let me just make one thing again abundantly clear. This operation has been a 2-year operation. Until we eradicate human trafficking here in Tampa, Florida, we're not going to stop. Take a look at the men and women behind you. They're not going to stop. We're going to keep going. And I love the fact when they sit and they communicate back to me that it's becoming harder and harder. They don't want to meet in Hillsborough County because they know that the heat's been on. Well, that's why I love the media. Thank you for putting this out because we're not going to stop. The game's going to come. The game's going to leave. Our human trafficking efforts are still going to continue.
How does this help the human traffic people, the women, the children, even some of the men, when you're arresting the Johns and they're really not involved yet?
Yeah, because if we eradicate the demand, there won't be a demand. It won't be so profitable. And that's a great question. This has become extremely profitable. You know, we generally we see movies, what we think is human trafficking. but it's stepfathers, it's boyfriends, it's gang members now are starting to realize how profitable trafficking individuals are. And that's why we're trying to target the demand. If we reduce the demand and it's not so profitable, they'll go on to something else, and we can continue doing what we're doing. And that's the best part. And these 71 individuals, some of them have been arrested before, 2 of them sexual offenders. That's great news. But the better news is over the last 2 years, we've been able to rescue 8 victims who've turned their life around, who we work with our non-governmental agencies and gotten them help, gotten them substance abuse help, gotten them back on their feet, got them gainful employment. They're the true heroes here. Well, the sad part is it hasn't reduced the demand. The demand is still there, and we've been monitoring that closely to say, hey, listen, during COVID, is everyone concerned? Will everyone be more safe? Not the case. The demand hasn't diminished at all. The risk to our employees is extremely high, and that's why I started today by, again, just thanking them once again by putting themselves out there to make sure these types of investigations happen and to make sure that we're eradicating human trafficking in Tampa.
On a larger scale, aside from Super Bowl, what makes Tampa so attractive?
That could be a lot of different things. I mean, I always go back to the reason I came here, and probably most of you, the weather. You know, the weather, a lot of financial implications. There's a lot of different reasons. But I think it's not just Tampa. It's the state of Florida. I think it's the warmer climates. I think it's harder to operate under a lot of these conditions. When you're cold, you're not out walking around. So I think a lot of that diminishes some of this activity. So I think it's the warm weather, you know, haphazardly just joking. But I think a lot of it's the weather. They can operate easier out in the warmer climates.
Any other questions?
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
All right, that was the update there in Florida. We're taking a live look right now at the White House. We're getting some more details on just how this week looks like it's going to be going. U.S. House Democrats will be voting on the 25th Amendment tomorrow night. And then the House will return on Wednesday at 9 a.m. to consider the one article of impeachment that they are putting together there in wake of the siege there. This will be the second time that President Trump will be impeached there. They're trying to get him out any way that they can right here. 25th Amendment, that's calling on Vice President and the rest of the cabinet to come together to get him to resign or leave office there. Or if that does not work, then they are going to bring this article of impeachment to the House floor for a vote there. So we will see how it all unfolds here. We're going to take another quick 2-minute break here for you on News Now from Fox. We appreciate everyone that continues to watch with us here. This is what we do on News Now from Fox. When there's breaking news, we just break right in there and let you know what's happening. We take live events, live news conferences as they are happening in real time to really just make it seem like if you are part of the news conference as well. We try to show everything from beginning to end in its entirety. And what we'll do now is go back out to that Chicago update, because today was the first day that schools back in session for Chicago public schools in classroom learning amid this COVID-19 pandemic.
If we want our children to receive everything that they rely upon from schools, from lessons to social services, meals, and in some cases, physical, speech, and occupational therapy, and much more, we have to give them access to a safe and nurturing environment in which to thrive. And the reality is that not every student has access to those kinds of resources in a remote, at-home environment. So it's up to us as elected leaders and public servants, as principals, educators, to step up, come together, and create those safe environments for students and their families. There's a lot that's been said over these last few weeks, and there's a lot that's being said today and every day about what's happening at CPS. And what that says to me is our public education system is key to our success as a city. And what I mean by that is providing the educational opportunities for our students and our young people is core to who we must be as a city. We can't get any of the other things done that are necessary, whether it's economic development, whether it's addressing the violence in our neighborhoods, the mental health and the trauma, if we don't have a strong and vibrant, healthy public school system. It is core. It is the ecosystem. It is the skeleton on which we build everything else. CPS is absolutely essential to who we are. Strengthening CPS in every way, in collaboration with the entire school community, is what we must be about. Why? Because our children depend upon it. As adults, as leaders, we must put our kids front and center first in everything that we do. And that is what has to be the only thing on the table as we are discussing important issues about today, but importantly, about the future. I want to thank the Principal Dixon and really all the principals and assistant principals across our system who have been doing yeoman's work, not just leading up to this moment, but all year round. They have been here in these buildings, making sure that our kids are getting fed, that our people who are here in the buildings are safe and healthy. Let's not forget that and them. Let me also again thank the staff who have been in these buildings all year round, particularly the cafeteria workers, the janitors, the security. They haven't been anywhere. They've been here in these schools all year round, making sure that our kids have a lifeline to the schools and a connection. I also want to thank the teachers that are working today, whether remote or in person, who are going and have been going above and beyond to make sure that our kids feel a sense of love and connection and support. Thank you for everything, teachers, that you have done every single day as well. We need you. We need you to continue our journey, our necessity, our obligation and responsibility to make sure that our kids get a safe and nurturing academic environment and that they are learning and growing as young people, as human beings. That's our obligation, and you are at the center of that necessary work. And let me thank every stakeholder in our school community who's been willing to come to the table to create sustainable and substantive solutions that work for all of our students. Again, the only issue on the table has to be what's in the best interest of our young people, our students. Because if we have that front and center, if we focus on that, all the rest will follow. Because building that safe and nurturing environment for them means creating a safe and nurturing environment for the entire school community. Thank you again, Dr. Jackson, Chief McDade, and the entire CPS executive team who have been working tirelessly over many weeks, the network chiefs. This doesn't happen without a lot of people making tremendous sacrifices, and we all owe you a debt of gratitude. I'm excited about today. As I said, I'm very nostalgic seeing these youngest kids. It reminds me so much of tender moments that I've experienced myself with my daughter and her young friends when they were very young in pre-K and elementary school. This is what we have to keep front and center. This is what we must be about. So thank you so much. Thank you for being here. And I'd love to welcome Dr. Jackson to the podium to say a few words.
Thank you, Mayor. I wore the wrong earrings today with this mask. Good morning, everyone.
First, I want to thank Mayor Lightfoot for her comments today and her leadership throughout this process. I would also like to echo her thoughts and sentiments to Mary Dixon, the principal here, and her entire administrative staff, as well as the network staff that have been working extremely hard in order to make this a possibility. They exemplify the professionalism and commitment that is, embodied in all of our schools across the city. So I want to thank them for showing up here today and also for their excitement. Like the mayor, I came in with a lot of excitement and anticipation, but really happy to see our students, our youngest students, some of our most vulnerable students here today learning, because they deserve a quality education. And I was even more excited to see the professionalism and commitment amongst our teachers that showed up here today. It's been 10 months since our students have been in school, and I know everyone signed up to do this work for the same exact reason, and that is to provide our kids with the quality education they deserve. I want to also thank the teachers that are working from home, as Mayor Lightfoot mentioned in her comments. They too are providing a quality education for our students. And despite all of the work that we've done over the past 10 months, we know that remote learning is not an option for all of our students. There are many students and families, 77,000 in fact, that have chosen an in-person option, and I'm excited about the possibility to offer that at this time. It is our mission in Chicago Public Schools to bring all of our students back over the course of the next few months in order to be reintegrated in the classroom with their teachers and their peers. In order to do this, CPS has been preparing since last summer. We've talked about our reopening plan at length, but I really want to remind people of all the preparation that has taken place in order to ensure the health and safety of our students and staff. We purchased air purifiers, face coverings, an abundant amount of cleaning and disinfecting supplies. We've also made significant building improvements throughout the city to ensure that all of our schools have the proper ventilation necessary. We've also studied schools across the country and right here in the city that have reopened, and all of the learnings from that research went into the reopening plan that we are executing today. We've gone above and beyond the requirements from CDC and CDPH in order to ensure that our students and staff are safe, and we are not done. In addition to the strict health protocols that we have now put in place, Chicago Public Schools is now implementing a voluntary COVID-19 surveillance testing program for school-based staff. This program launched last week and will help the district monitor the prevalence of COVID-19 among asymptomatic staff in our schools. Employees who participate in the program will be tested monthly at their schools. We will be administering rapid tests, and those findings will be available in as little as 15 minutes. Any staff member with a presumptive positive will be offered a PCR COVID-19 test at the school the same day. Rapid test results, as well as PCR results, will be quickly communicated to families and staff in the schools. Beginning today, later today, you will be able to follow and track that data on our website, cps.edu/reopening. Please note that testing is voluntary, but we strongly encourage all school-based employees to participate. While over 20% of school-based employees chose not to participate in our surveillance testing program last week, we want to continue to encourage them to do so. This is, in fact, one of the things that we agreed upon with the teachers union that needed to be in place in order to have a successful reopening to school. This is just one more step in our plan to ensure that our staff and students remain healthy and safe in our schools. Again, I want to thank the staff that returned to school today. This is incredibly important work. Thousands of students came to school today expecting to see their teachers, and we know that tens of thousands of more will be returning in the next few weeks. I know that there are some parents who are still taking a wait-and-see approach, and I want to assure you that we've done everything within our power to make sure that these schools are safe and that your children will be welcomed back by exceptionally talented staff here in CPS. We are doing this for our Black and Latinx students whose attendance and grades have suffered greatly because of the struggles with remote learning. We're doing this for our youngest learners who need the physical presence of an adult in order to thrive in a classroom setting, whether that's in person or learning at home. And we're doing this for many of our parents who are themselves essential workers whose bravery throughout this pandemic we have been championing Now it's time to provide them with an option for in-person instruction for their kids. Most importantly, we're reopening our schools because we believe it is safe to do so. We know that parents still have questions and concerns. We encourage you to reach out directly to your schools. You're going to get the best information from the principals and the teachers at your local schools. But should families have questions or concerns, I want to remind folks of the CPS hotline, which is 773-553-KIDS, KIDS, or you can use our email address, which is familyservices@cps.edu. Again, I want to thank everyone who has played a role in making today possible. We should truly be excited about what we have accomplished today, and I am looking forward to a successful rest of the school year. At this time, I would like to invite a parent to the podium to talk a little bit about the importance of in-person instruction. Please welcome Maria Vasquez, a mother of 2 pre-K students here at Dawes Elementary.
Buenos días, me llamo María Vázquez y soy una orgullosa mamá de la Escuela DAS.
We're going to take a quick 2-minute break for you right here on News Now from Fox. Coming up in the next hour, this is what we have that we are waiting on. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will be holding a briefing, and then we will also have an update in California by Governor Gavin Newsom on the very latest with vaccines and the COVID-19 surges that they are seeing in California. So we'll have all that coming up in the next hour here on News Now from Fox.
So how many, do you know roughly how many students came to school today across the district?
No, we don't have that number yet, yeah.
Okay. And then for the mayor, a lot of reporters, including myself, we noticed that you did extend the stay-at-home order for the city of Chicago. Can you square your thought process with having teachers and some students back today and then also extending that stay-at-home order?
Yeah, I neglected earlier to mention that Dr. Allison Arter, our Commissioner of Public Health, is here. I'll invite her to go in. But we extended it as to make sure that it was aligned with, I think, what the state was doing. But we are making significant progress. Recall that when we put the stay-at-home advisory in place, we were seeing a really troubling increase in cases, percent positivity. Since November, when it peaked, we have been coming back down, even through Thanksgiving and then Christmas and New Year's. So we are making steady progress overall. So the advisory is really about making sure that we're doing everything that we can to give people the best information. And recall that from the very beginning, schools were exempted from the stay-at-home advisory. Dr. Arwood, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I think I would just underscore that last point, that if you look at the language of that stay-at-home advisory, it's about essential. We specifically say people who are going to work, who are going to school, or who are performing other essential activities should continue to do those. But if there are things that are not essential, we've asked people to limit that. And broadly, we are making very good progress here in Chicago. We continue to be reassured by the way that the data is going. Certainly, we're still following a little bit after the holidays, but by and large, we are in a much, much better place than we were. And in fact, we're doing much better than the majority of the country.
So while I have you here, Doctor, so we're in Tier 3 as far as our mitigations. What is your thought about when we can go back to Tier 2? What are you seeing? Obviously, we had the holidays, and that 2-week period is kind of coming to an end. What specific numbers will you be looking at? Is it that positivity rate to go to Tier 2?
So I would note that this is state mitigation that is in place at this point, and it is in place all over the state, as you're aware. And that there's a few factors that are included in that at the state level. One is being under a 12% positivity, which we are here in Chicago, and which most of the state is at this point. And then there are some other metrics related to hospital capacity and ensuring that hospital numbers are downtrending. Our hospital numbers look good here in Chicago. We are under that 12% positivity. Again, the governor and the state have signaled they want to watch sort of the stabilization after New Year's, which I'm in agreement with. And I do want people to understand, though, that the mitigation comes in steps. And so these tiered mitigations that have been put in place at the next level, if we're able to back out of that, that doesn't yet bring us to indoor dining, for example. It doesn't yet completely open things up. It is a stepwise progression back. So I am feeling optimistic about where we are as a city and as a state. And some of the conversation about that stay-at-home order is to make sure that we're being as consistent as possible across the state. We're heading the right way, but we are still asking people, again, outside of work, school, and things they need to be doing to be, limiting opportunities for COVID spread. Schools have not been shown to be a source of COVID spread for the community.
Okay, and then perhaps you want to stay up here for this, but a lot of teachers, a lot of teachers would like to be vaccinated for COVID-19. They're coming here, they're essential workers under the stay-at-home advisory. Where are they in line? When can they look to get this vaccine?
Yeah, absolutely. And, we obviously, you heard the mayor talk about how central education is to the health and functioning of a city. And within phase 1B, which is the phase, we're not there yet. We're still working on our healthcare workers. We've still got tens of thousands of outpatient healthcare workers. As we start to move forward into 1B, just like at the state level, we both open up vaccine to older Chicagoans, and we start working on some very specific frontline essential workers. And that does include teachers, but also other school staff, daycare staff. It's a large lift. There's about 150,000 people who work in that educational category just in Chicago, and there's some other settings that we're working through. I do, and one other, just to put a specific point on that, when we're talking about healthcare workers right now, that does include healthcare workers based in schools. So we have nurses, for example, who work in schools across this city for whom vaccination is available and is being scheduled right now. And I expect that over the next few months, we will be very much working to get all of the adults who work in school settings vaccinated. So not just yet, but on the horizon.
A couple of months?
Yes, I think, we'll see. A lot depends on how quickly vaccine comes to us. We get about 32,000 first doses of vaccine a week right now. You think about how many people there are over 65, 370,000. How many essential workers? Hundreds of thousands, 150,000 just in education. There is going to have to be some patience here, but I would expect that we will likely be beginning, in the sort of February to March timeframe, and then we'll continue to vaccinate through, over these next few months. Essential workers, frontline, we want to get vaccinated, and we want to make sure, though, that we are having a safe school environment, which, again, I have every confidence in here, as we've seen in our private and parochial schools across Chicago to date. Really pleased that we're moving ahead with in-person education, especially for the kids who need it most today.
One more on education, then maybe to some political stuff.
Do you want me or do you want?
I think I want you. Okay. So this question is from the Tribune.
No.
This question is from the Trib. For some of the special needs students where wearing a mask is physically hard for them, and perhaps they might be sharing a bus with kids who are wearing a mask, the Trib reporter is wondering, how are you communicating with parents so that, is there a notification like, hey, there's some kids who might not be masked up for different reasons? And just how are you communicating that with some of your cluster programs?
Yeah, I think all of that will be done on an individual basis. There are students who, have difficulty with masks, who pull them down, but our staff has been trained to address those issues. Also, in some cases, additional PPE. I know teachers and paras who have to get very close to students will have the face shields in addition to masks. And so, again, we're doing this on a one-on-one basis, depending on the schools and the individual needs of the students. I would also say many of the parents are also stepping up and providing additional resources as well, should they think that that's necessary for their kids to be safe. And again, there are also parents who are opting to keep their children home because of those fears and concerns. But, you know, as we've said already here today, I feel confident. People worried about the younger children in the mask, and what I've always told them is that students are oftentimes more flexible and adaptive than adults, and so I feel confident that our children will be able to comply. We've seen that in other school settings here in Chicago and across the country that have reopened. Yeah.
All right, and Mayor, Jesse from Channel 7.
Before you ask us the next question, I just want to put a finer point on the vaccine question. And I've been beating this drum now for some time. We need more vaccine. Absolutely, we need to get teachers and other essential workers vaccinated and make that available to them as quickly as possible. But I'm discouraged by the fact that we are getting less first doses now than we had at the beginning. That has to change around completely. We need to be getting many more first doses from the federal government. And we have been talking, of course, with the incoming Biden-Harris administration, but we still need to get more vaccine as quickly as possible. While there's vaccine hesitancy in some quarters, there are a number of folks who said, Mayor, when can I get my vaccine? We want to accommodate everyone who wants it and needs it, but we've got to get more vaccine from the federal government, period. That is going to be a significant impediment for us to be able to move forward if we don't get more first doses more quickly than what we're seeing thus far.
All right, thank you. This is from Jesse with Channel 7. He says CTU is telling him that it proposed using only teachers who volunteer to go back into the classroom because there's only a small portion of students who opted for the in-person learning right now. The union claims your team shot down this proposal to have volunteer
I don't think
teachers.
I understood well, if you understood, I didn't understand the question. Go ahead.
Okay.
There are questions about staff returning and comparing that to student enrollment. And I think what people have to understand is that this is the first step in a process to bring everyone back. So our pre-K staff, our cluster staff, and those adults that support those programs are returning to work. But we aren't trying to create a situation where some people work and some people don't. We're starting in tranches. We started with this group, but the expectation is that over the course of the next couple of months, everyone is going to return to in-person work and instruction.
Okay, thank you.
I'm glad you understood the question.
So a couple more political questions. Mayor, how do you feel about the Chicago Police Union FOP president's recent remarks and apology? Some aldermen are asking for some sort of letter. What would that do, or a resolution in council against Catanzara's, I guess, reign? So what's your feeling about his situation right now with the FOP and what needs to be done from the city's point of view?
Well, there's a lot of layers to the question that you just asked. I think the FOP president's recent comments, and I think what really has ignited this latest issue, is his really tone-deaf comments about what happened last week in our nation's capital. You know, I have to say that I personally felt deeply affected by seeing those vigilantes and domestic terrorists laying siege to our nation's capital. I was very privileged as a young person right out of college to work in our nation's capital. I worked on Capitol Hill. I worked for a member of Congress. I walked those halls. And I walk those halls with incredible reverence for what that building represents, not only for us as Americans, but what it represents as really the citadel of democracy, the people's house. And the fact that there was a joint session of Congress that was there, fulfilling its constitutional obligation, and that the current president in what I think is a criminal act, incited insurrection against a core part of our democracy and attacked the legislative branch. And you watch the video from that siege, I still feel despair and fear about what happened. And I think people of goodwill, with their eyes wide open, saw that for what it was, which is an incredible attack on our democracy, an undermining of who we are as a nation. No one should take that lightly. This was not just about people exercising their frustration. People came there armed. When I see these individuals with zip ties, what were they doing with that? Why was that necessary? Came with arms, guns, explosives, and other things. This wasn't people merely exercising their First Amendment rights. These are domestic terrorists who came to take hostages and upend a constitutional exercise by the legislative branch. So the fact that he waved that off as nothing says a lot about the character of him. But that's not the only thing that he has done. He has a long history of saying and doing things that are anti-democratic, small d democratic. This isn't about partisanship. This is about, do you, as a sworn member of law enforcement, were you swore an oath to uphold the U.S. and the Illinois Constitution? Do you actually believe in your oath? He has said and done too many things over too long a period of time, which clearly underscore the fact that he doesn't believe in the rule of law, that he doesn't respect the U.S. Constitution, that he doesn't respect the Illinois Constitution. So I absolutely understand the outrage that has been expressed in a number of quarters. And let me just say that the fact that the national FOP really came down hard on him in an unprecedented statement against a sitting FOP president, that tells you how egregious his conduct and his behavior is. His non-apology, I'm sorry if I offended someone. If I offended someone, you did, sir. You offended our democracy.
Let's do two more.
Two more? Okay. We'll stick with some politics here. Bill from WLSAM wants to know, do you think President Trump should be removed from office early, and if so, by which method?
What I think is that there has to be something in place to make sure that the president does not commit any more criminal acts, that he does not engage in acts of insurrection, and he does not engage in intemperate actions that put our democracy, our nation, and our world at risk. That's what I think. You know, I worry a little bit about impeachment simply because the time frame, you know, McConnell, who still has a voice, says that he won't take anything up until the 19th, which is the day before Biden's swearing in and inauguration. We need to turn the page from this horrible, hideous chapter in our nation's history. We need to do that. We need to start a new administration with a new set of values and principles and reconnect with each other as Americans, as residents of this great country. I worry about...
You're watching News Now from Fox. It looks like we have Mike Pompeo speaking at a virtual event in Washington, D.C. It's called The Voice of America. He just stepped out to the podium, so we'll play it out here on News Now from Fox.
I always told my son, I told the story before when he was growing up, I said, work hard, keep your faith, and tell the truth. He mostly followed my advice. And it has served him and many of you I know well. Your mandate here at Voice of America is unambiguous: to be accurate, objective, and comprehensive, and to represent America. The mission of USAGM is to inform, engage, and connect people around the world in support of freedom and democracy. That's because expanding freedom and democracy are what America has always been about. You're the voice of American exceptionalism, We should be proud of that. The world needs VOA's clarion call for freedom. Now more than ever, I hear it wherever I go. That's what I wanted to talk about today. I tell audiences about American exceptionalism wherever and whenever I can, because it's true and because it's important. America is good and great, and everyone who truly grabs our founding understands this. Michael and Bob have made studying this history their life's work. Many of you have made it your life's mission too. That's why you work here at Voice of America. We were indeed the first nation founded on the central belief that all human beings are endowed with certain unalienable rights, and that governments are instituted to secure those God-given rights. We have always striven for a more perfect union. And goodness knows we don't always get it right. Therefore, we need both pride and humility about our past and our present. We need the truth. But it's very clear that when Americans have united around our founding values, be it in Philadelphia, at Gettysburg, at Seneca Falls, or during Martin Luther King's March on Washington, we've made good on our founding promise time and time again. Now, our adversaries try and claim otherwise. When the Chinese Communist Party attempted to exploit the tragic death of George Floyd to claim their authoritarian system was somehow superior to ours, I issued a statement which read in part, quote, "During the best of times, the People's Republic of China ruthlessly imposes communism. But amid the most difficult challenge, the United States secures freedom. There is no moral equivalence. This is a self-evident truth. It is not fake news for you to broadcast that this is the greatest nation in the history of the world and the greatest nation this civilization has ever known. Indeed, I'm not saying this to ignore our faults. Indeed, just the opposite. It is to acknowledge them. But this isn't the vice of America, focusing on everything that's wrong with our great nation. It's the voice of America. It certainly isn't the place to give authoritarian regimes in Beijing or Tehran a platform. Your mission is to promote democracy, freedom, and American values all across the world. It's a U.S. taxpayer-funded institution aimed squarely at that. Indeed, this is what sets VOA apart from MSNBC and Fox News and the like. You can give voice to the voiceless in dark corners of the world. You're the voice of American striving. You're the voice of American exceptionalism. You are indeed the tip of freedom's spear. Now look, like many government agencies after the Cold War ended, our international broadcasters, well, they lost their way. Many of you know this. And there were, I'm sure, many reasons. The Soviet Union had collapsed, the wall had come down, names like bin Laden and Zarqawi and Baghdadi weren't widely known. In fact, many wrote that history was over. We allowed security protocols to lapse, and VOA lost its commitment to its founding mission. Its broadcasts had become less about telling the truth about America and too often about demeaning America. In 2013, one of my predecessors described the Broadcasting Board of Governors as, quote, practically defunct, end of quote. Look, that's in part why Congress created the role of CEO of the USAGM on a bipartisan basis. And it is again why I'm here today. I read that some VOA employees didn't want me to speak here today. I'm sure it was only a handful. They didn't want the voice of American diplomacy to be broadcast on the Voice of America. Think about that for just a moment. Look, we're all part of institutions with duties and responsibilities higher and bigger and more important than any one of us individually. But this kind of censorial instinct is dangerous. It's morally wrong. Indeed, it's against your statutory mandate here at VOA. Censorship, wokeness, political correctness, it all points in one direction: authoritarianism cloaked as moral righteousness. Similar to what we're seeing at Twitter and Facebook and Apple and on too many university campuses today. It's not who we are. It's not who we are as Americans. And it's not what Voice of America should be. It's time that we simply put wokeism to sleep. And you can lead the way. You all know. That's why you came here. There's a new dawn here at Voice of America. The American public doesn't know this, but when Michael took office, some 1,500 employees, almost 40% of the workforce, had been improperly vetted, including many with high-level security clearances. VOA was rubber stamping J-1 visas for foreign nationals, including some from communist China. We shouldn't be doing that. We have plenty of Mandarin language speakers here in America, and we are building, growing, teaching, educating more committed patriots, some of Chinese American descent, who are amazing people. The Trump administration team is working to fix these national security threats. We want to vet employees properly. We want to reorient VOA to its mission of truth and unbiased reporting. We want to depoliticize what takes place here. It's too important for the American people and for the world. Returning this organization to its charter and its charge to spread the message of freedom, democracy, and American exceptionalism. This isn't about politicizing these institutions. We're trying to take politics out. And that's a pretty good feature story for whoever wants to write it up. As Secretary of State, I'm telling you all of this because I want the best for the people here and for this organization, because you are vital to helping America shine light into the darkest places with the power that only America can muster. Governments like those in China, Iran, North Korea, they don't have the respect for the universal dignity of every human being in the way that America does. Indeed, that is what America was founded upon. Those regimes are anathema to everything that our nation stands for. We know that government exists to serve people. They believe that people exist to serve government. And VOA's work is vital. As I said before, you're the tip of freedom's spear. Every week, 278 million people listen to VOA in 47 languages. There are Iranians who are listening to you, wondering if they'll ever be able to shed their Islamic shackles. There are Moldovans and Ukrainians who want truthful reporting, not Russian disinformation and propaganda. There are Chinese citizens who are tired of a regime that's done nothing but brutalize them since 1949. There are Venezuelans who want to know the truth of the Maduro regime's corruption. There are oppressed people all over the globe who still turn to America for hope. Now, I know many of you, especially those of you overseas, continue and have done heroic work. Thank you. I want to commend VOA's Hong Kong reporting team, which faced political intimidation, harassment, and attacks, but still got the job done. My highest praise. Well done. You were behind the barricades of the freedom fighters telling their stories. You're upholding VOA's finest traditions and continuing to be the voice of American exceptionalism. I also want to pay tribute to members of the other radio services who are here and listening. The only Uyghur language news service in the world is run by RFA. You've told everyone who will listen, indeed some who didn't want to, the truth about the CCP's atrocities against its own people in Xinjiang, the stain of the century. And you've done so despite the fact that the CCP has jailed the relatives of at least 6 RFA journalists in Xinjiang's internment camps and continues to threaten you and your families simply for doing your jobs. Your work takes courage. Please keep telling everyone who will listen what's happening in the toughest parts of the world. The world expects it, and America will be better off for it. I want to leave you with a quote that conveys why the VOA's mission is so critical before I take some questions from Bob. This quote's from a ways back. It's from George Washington. He said, quote, "Truth will ultimately prevail where there is pains to bring it to light," end of quote. When America brings truth to the world, we bring light. Don't forget that. It's what you do. May God bless you. May God bless the voice of America, and God bless these United States. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Some of the questions I had for you were fielded from our division directors who wanted to also have their input to get you to answer some of these. But let me begin with this one. This isn't a commercial media. We can afford to tell the full truth about America. and the amplitude of American life in all of its facets. In your many travels in your recent years, what would you judge as those parts of America that are least known by foreign audiences that we need to tell them about?
Yeah. You know, it's a really good question. If I have a chance in a moment where we are away from the formal business of the day, I'll often ask ambassadors or foreign ministers, when were you last in the States? What'd you do? Where'd you go see? The answer is almost always, I went to New York, I went to Washington, I went to San Francisco, or I went to Los Angeles. The adventuresome may have traveled all the way to Boston. Boy, that's not representative of all of who America is. I'm from Kansas. It's a different place in so many ways. It's engaged in different businesses. Its government is different. Its people think about the world in a different way. These stories from places other than the coasts are important, and that extends to rural parts of South Carolina, to Appalachia, to folks who live up in Minnesota and along our northern border along Canada. There are so many different facets of the United States that I think if you asked people around the world, they would only know this place we are here in Washington, or maybe our financial center in New York. I hope that you all get a chance to tell those other stories. And I'd add one last piece. It's not just geographic. It's not just where it is. You could find right here in Washington dozens and dozens of different stories about different pieces of the things, the institutions that make America so unique, so special. These things that our founders called the small platoons, our civic organizations, right? How many of you are members of the PTA, trying to help your kids' school be just a little bit better? How many of you participate in a church group on Wednesday evenings where you have your chili feed or you just gather? Those are important parts of American life that have made us so unique and so special, and I want people all across the world to see those things, because those institutions form bedrock of our nation, and they can help their countries too.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. You've made some very eloquent speeches about the relationship between American founding principles and U.S. foreign policy. How would you prioritize those fundamental rights, some of which you referred to in your remarks, when you, with the limited time with foreign heads of state, want to have a clear message? You've been very forthright on freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom of... How do you prioritize those, or is the prioritization custom made for the country you're addressing?
Bob, it certainly does vary by where you are and the situation that you find that government, and frankly, the traditions of that country. The Unalienable Rights Commission, led by Professor Marion Glendon and Peter Berkowitz at the State Department, it's a great report. It's 50 pages. I'd urge you to go read it. You'll agree with some of it, some you may not. But what it tried to do was to take this human rights project from the 20th century that has just fallen away. It lost its capacity to understand the things that were contained in our founding about how human rights are formed. It had moved away even from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And what I wanted to do in that was to reground American foreign policy and how we thought about human rights. And I think the report captures it pretty well. Your point about religious freedom and the capacity to speak freely, two core rights that if a nation gets it wrong, it will be less secure, it will be less prosperous, its people will be less whole. And so we've spent a lot of time talking about those issues around the world. We've made progress in certain places, other places we've not, but it's important that American leaders, not only the Secretary of State, but all of us, acknowledge those shortcomings when we speak with foreign leaders and get them headed in a better direction for their people. I'm proud of the work we've done in this regard. These principles matter. Their execution and implementation is complex because foreign policy always is. There are competing priorities. But America can never walk away from those central principles and understandings. And we know the difference between rights-respecting countries and those that aren't. And we have an obligation to call each of them precisely what they are.
Now, as you well know, we're at the cusp of a change in administrations. on certain foreign policy issues, there seems to have formed a bipartisan consensus. For instance, perhaps China, on both sides of the aisle, is seen as the principal challenge to the United States today. Are there others? North Korea, Venezuela, Iran? On which of these do you expect some continuity with the new administration, and where do you perhaps see what may come as the biggest changes?
Look, it's an important question. Leaders always want to understand that when you make a commitment to them that it will survive. We have elections every 2 years here, federal elections. We have presidential elections every 4 years. Look, your point about the threat from the Chinese Communist Party, I think, is right. President Trump rightly identified this when he started campaigning back in 2015 as the singular threat to the centrality of Western thought in the world, the idea that we're going to have a rules-based system that respected property rights and human dignity. China is singular in the threat it poses to those things. And I do think there's a consensus there. I've worked with Democrats on many important issues, in Hong Kong, and issues, as I referred to the Uyghurs in Xinjiang and the atrocities taking place there. So I do hope that stays the same. I hope, too, even in the Middle East, even where the previous administration had a different approach with respect to the Islamic Republic of Iran, it's not 2015. What has taken place in the Middle East in these last 4 years, whether that's the efforts we have put to constrain the theocracy, the kleptocrats in charge in Iran, the work we have done with the Abraham Accords, the work that we've done to recognize the fundamental understandings of Israel as a nation that has a right to exist, and its capital is in Jerusalem. It is the home of the Jewish people there. Those are things that I believe will be lasting, because I think the people of those nations want them to last, and I hope that the next administration will continue to build on them in a way that continues to build out peace and prosperity among all the nations in the Middle East. I'm hopeful that that will take place.
I noticed over the weekend you signed a joint declaration with 4 other foreign ministers, Australia, the UK, New Zealand, regarding the recent arrests in Hong Kong. You also removed the restraints on high-level diplomatic contacts between the United States and Taiwan, and apparently the U.S. ambassador to the UN will be in Taiwan soon. What do you expect to accomplish with this flurry?
Yeah, well, flurry, I find funny.
I should have chosen another word.
But no, I get it. Look, I wish these things had been done a long time ago. These weren't rushed. These were considered efforts that we made, and they're an important part of the strategy that we've laid out with respect to how to protect and preserve American freedoms vis the challenge that the Chinese Communist Party presents. Look, one of the core problems, I gave some remarks where I talked about China and said, no matter what it is they say, we must distrust and verify. And you referred to the arrest of these some 50 people in Hong Kong. The Chinese Communist Party made a promise to the people of Hong Kong, and they walked away from it. The Chinese Communist Party has a commitment, a set of understandings we have with respect to Taiwan. We need to hold the parties accountable to those commitments as well. The Chinese Communist Party promised President Obama they wouldn't arm the islands in the South China Sea, and they turned around and did it, and there was almost no cost imposed. We have attempted to deliver a clear understanding of the requirements that we have for the Chinese Communist Party and how it should behave, that aren't, frankly, very different from what we expect of any nation with respect to how they interact with the United States. And we do that because we have a responsibility to preserve and protect security and prosperity for the American people. Our policy with respect to the Chinese Communist Party has furthered that, and this will be a long challenge. The Chinese Communist Party has a clear intent for hegemonic dominance, and we have an obligation, a responsibility to the American people and, frankly, to freedom-loving people around the world to make sure that that is not the world that our children and grandchildren live in.
It's interesting, in meeting with the division directors of Voice of America, how frequently in those meetings the name of China comes up. When I ask them what's on the horizon, what are you noticing, it's China. Latin America, China. East Africa, China. And it's not simply the Belt and Road Initiative, it's their information strategy, how they get affiliates in those regions of the world, how they feed them free stuff, and as you know, a whole of government approach. Now, the United States isn't whole of government, but Voice of America is here to do our part through our bureaus and through our reporting. What do you think we can do better to help highlight the dangers these things represent when seen together rather than as a separate series of approaches?
Well, this challenge is, in fact, comprehensive. Our administration began by working on the economic side of this. Right? The president placed tariffs on Chinese goods. He's tried to stop intellectual property theft, denying tens of millions of jobs in the United States of America because they would steal our information, take it back to China, build it, and then dump it here in the United States. It's information. You talked about that. This is ongoing. Take the issue of the Wuhan virus. It has now, I understand the Chinese Communist Party is now going to permit the World Health Organization to go in and find out where this all began, but it took months and months of effort to do that. We are now more than a year on. We still don't have access to important information about how the virus began. It's important for health and safety and to make sure that something like this doesn't come out of China again. Your team can report these things, report these facts. Your point about it being a global phenomenon. I have a bureau. I have a China desk. I have a East Asia Pacific bureau. We have an Indo-Pacific strategy. But every one of my ambassadors and chiefs of mission understands that China presents a challenge in their country, wherever they may be, in Africa, in Latin America, in Southeast Asia for sure. And our team on the ground is working to protect American security from the Chinese Communist Party in the country that they have been assigned to. I hope your reporters, no matter where they find themselves, if they're in South Africa or in Morocco or wherever they are, observes the activities of the Chinese Communist Party inside of their country and how it impacts the people of those countries as well.
If I may ask a last question, this one more related to Russia. The United States seems to be shrinking its footprint in Africa, so is France. Russia is increasing its. Is this the result of a judgment on the part of the United States that disorder on the African continent is less of a problem or less of a threat to our interests, or how would you?
So the forces, the disposition that the DOD has made has really been about the counterterrorism fight more broadly. How is it that we allocate U.S. resources to keep the homeland safe? So the decisions the president has made with respect to Afghanistan and the Middle East broadly, Syria, you talk about North Africa as well, has been to allocate the capacity of the United States to preserve and protect the homeland. I'm always mindful, and it's easy to write about, if you just focus on troop numbers alone, if you say the United States used to have 1,000 people, now they only have 800, or they used to have 800, now they only have 400, you may well be missing America's capacity to preserve and protect itself. I was the director of the CIA. I know the other tools and capabilities that we can bring. They are unseen. They don't get reported from the podium at the Department of Defense. But the American people should know. President Trump has been unambiguous about getting it right, making sure we put fewer of our young men and women in harm's way, but never giving up the responsibility we have to ensure that terrorism, or at least the risk that a terror act takes place and hurts Americans, whether they're here in the United States or elsewhere in the world as well.
Great. Mr. Secretary, I can't thank you enough for gracing us with your presence today. It was very kind of you to make the trip, and it's deeply appreciated by me and by everyone else here. Please join me in a round of applause.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Let's just say,
thank you, my friend. Thank you.
Please observe the directional signs as you exit the auditorium. We ask that you avoid lingering in the hallway outside and that you maintain 6 feet of social distancing at all times. Thank you.
Well, that was the very latest from Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Some good information there talking about what's going on overseas and the status of our military as well. Thanks for joining us here on News Now from Fox. We're bringing you all of these live, raw, and unfiltered feeds from across the country. It looks like right now we have a COVID-19 update coming out of the state of California with Governor Gavin Newsom and other health officials from out there. I'm going to send some of you off to a 2-minute commercial break. When you come back, the very latest of COVID-19 in California. If you're new to us here, we appreciate you watching. We are here to provide you with the information coming in from across the nation. Very little commentary. We want you to make up your mind for yourself about the news events of the day. And there's a lot going on in the country right now. We want everyone to take a step back, breathe a little bit, and understand that we're just here to provide you the news and the latest and the details so you can be educated on what's going on. I'm Daytona Everett. Go ahead and follow me on Twitter at Daytona News Now. Trying to be a credible news source for you in this time of uncertainty. So the latest on COVID-19 in California, we'll bring it to you here on News Now.
Take that.
Sure. So we as we've said, some last week, the idea that our tiering and phases has slowed us down. We have certainly begun to address that, working closely with our providers and our counties to make sure the message that all individuals in that Tier 1A can be vaccinated immediately. There shouldn't be a difference between the first tier and the third tier in 1A, and then ensuring that counties that have successfully and health providers who have successfully made an effort and moved through their 1A are able to begin, planning and moving towards the 1B. So really trying to communicate both on the level of prioritization and then this ever important issue around enforcement. We've talked very clearly about the fact that we don't want people profiting from use of the vaccine, selling the vaccine, providing it to the highest bidder, but also that we can't afford with this scarce resource to have any waste. So really working over the last many days, weeks with our direct partners who are the vaccinators, sending the message that we need to make sure that we use what we have in our freezers, that we get them out. That's part of the reason we have the 1 million dose goal that we set last week, and making sure that we really do create an ability for a number of our vaccinators to work through that as quickly as possible. We recognize that the focus on risk and exposure is an important one. We have plenty of populations, our oldest Californians, who, by virtue of what we've seen over the past 10 months, face some of the greatest risk when they do become infected. So ensuring that we stay focused not just on those in our general population, but first and foremost on our oldest Californians in congregate care facilities, working with our pharmacy partners and a number of others to make sure that that happens. And then secondly, focusing on exposure. We've talked about from the beginning the role of the essential workers, those on the front lines of whether it's in our hospital and healthcare facilities, whether it's in our food industry or other key places that keep California going, making sure that unavoidable potential exposure is protected with some vaccine. So the goal of making sure that the state and our counties and many, many others, in fact, clear the way so that we can get vaccine out as soon as it comes into the state is a key goal. And we've made a great deal of progress on that in the last week.
And just a reminder, the third leg of that stool, risk, exposure, equity. So risk, exposure, equity with that age overlay. That's the foundation. Flexibility now within the tier that we're currently in. Just a reminder, current focus on vaccination, healthcare workers, residents in long-term settings, but now flexibility with that that sort of prong of focus, equity, exposure, risk, and age, allowing more flexibility within phase 1B, tier 1, phase 1B, tier 2. So anyway, thank you for opportunity to clarify.
Karen Luna, LA Times.
Governor, in light of the potential for armed protests at the California Capitol in the coming days, what extra security precautions have you ordered to prepare for that? And then separately, do you plan to activate the National Guard to support law enforcement?
We as needed on the latter, and the answer is pretty self-evident for anyone who's been around the Capitol, that everybody is on, I think, a high alert in terms of just making sure that everybody is safe and protected. People's free speech can be advanced, but there's no violence. And so those operational.
I want to cut in here on News Now from Fox to this California COVID-19 press conference to go out to Seattle. 2 Seattle officers are being investigated after attending those violent pro-Trump rallies at the U.S. Capitol on Wednesday. This investigation is ongoing. So we're going to take that live for you here on News Now from Fox.
Standard for law enforcement training out of Georgetown University of Law Center. SPD has been looking for an effective training in this area, and the Office of Inspector General also recommended implementing such a program. This training gives SPD employees the skills and tools to prevent misconduct, reduce mistakes, and promote health and wellness. It helps employees know how to overcome the very real inhibitions we all face about calling out other colleagues if they're doing something we know is wrong. In this case, we know about it because another employee told their chain of command. They saw behavior that they thought might violate the values of this department, and they spoke up. And I thank them for that. Even if nothing against policy or law happened in this case, it needed to be reviewed. This is the type of accountability we expect. We will take some questions on this at the end. Now I want to shift to updating you on 2020 year-end crime trends. As we all know, 2020 was a year like no other. And for that reason, I'm not putting a lot of stock in most of the crime numbers. Due to the pandemic, we all changed our behaviors. Stores closed. People stopped going to their places of work. Bars and restaurants were severely restricted. We also know, both because of COVID and other events, that the number of 911 calls dropped throughout most of the year. So telling you that certain reported crimes are up or down compared to 2019, I believe has less meaning this year than any other year. Nonetheless, we are sharing for you information online, the current year-end reported major crime stats. I want to focus on where we ended the year in homicides. First, because any loss of life is unacceptable, and because we know from research that almost all homicides will eventually become known to police regardless of what happens to the reporting of other crimes. Across the country in 2020, cities reported significant increases in homicides and shots fired. Almost all major cities has significant increases. Some reports show murder increased 36% in 2020 compared to 2019 across the United States. In Seattle, we ended in 2020 with 50 people who were willfully murdered. In 2019, there were 31 individuals killed. That represents a 61% increase, or 19 additional people who were murdered this year. This was the highest number of murders in 26 years. This is unacceptable, and we cannot tolerate this level of violence. Our homicide detectives also investigated 2 delayed deaths resulting from injuries sustained in 2015, and they investigated the recovery of bodies on Alki where individuals were killed outside of Seattle. I want to thank our officers, crime scene detectives, or investigators, and homicide detectives for doing such incredible work. They've worked every one of these cases with exhaustive effort and have successfully brought justice to the families of those killed in a majority of these cases. 60% of 2020 homicides were committed with a gun, compared to 66% in 2019. Most of the victims are male, between the ages of 18 to 29 and 30 to 49. And most, the number 25, or 49%, were black. I'm not going into the multiple theories I'm aware of for why we and other cities had such a large one-year increase? There's no one clear explanation. But I do know the department is working to decrease the violence. We continue to submit the recovered shell casings and crime guns to the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, which is known as NIBIN. This year, we logged over 240 hits or connections to other criminal events with a gun, and over 150 were directly connected to crimes in Seattle. For the 4th year in a row, we took over 1,000 guns off the street. Late last year, Chief Bess and I asked the King County Public Health Director Patty Hayes to help convene a meeting to approach our gun violence issues as a regional public health approach. Over the last year, SPD has partnered has been a partner at the table outlining all current efforts and gaps in the system for preventing and responding to gun violence, both with and without the involvement of law enforcement. We're working with city partners and community regarding shot-fired instances, so trusted members of the communities experiencing this violence can respond, make connections, offer services, and help end the violence. For those individuals intent on committing gun violence, we're working with the King County Prosecutor's Office, the United States Attorney's Office, and ATF to refresh task force that have been successful at taking dangerous individuals off the street. These efforts are being guided by a commitment that addressing violent crime does not need to mean high levels of enforcement in our communities already suffering. We're focused on the individuals we know that are carrying the guns, calling shots, and pulling triggers. We know that associations with guns increase the risk of being injured or killed. To build a community capacity that can prevent future violence, we have to stop the bleeding right now. Illegally carrying or using a gun needs to come with the highest levels of accountability so we can create the space for services to hopefully more permanently end the violence. At the end of 2020, we saw the numbers trending down, and we're committed to a 2021 that not only has lower numbers than the highs of 2020, but the relatively low numbers of 2019. I know that officers are out there doing the work, responding to the shots fired, taking guns off the streets, and working with community to reduce the frequency of people carrying guns. This work will take more input than just the police department, but we will continue to do our part. Thank you, and I will now take questions. So if they were directly involved in the insurrection, and that is, participating in the actual altercations that were occurring with the Capitol Hill police, then that is part of the federal violation of law, and so that is what we will be looking at. That is what will be part of the OPA investigation to see what level of involvement that if any SPD officers were participating in that level of involvement. If they're at a peaceful public rally or political rally, that is not the issue that I have at hand. It is that are participating in the actual violence that is actually at the U.S. Capitol.
And that's whether or not they reached the Capitol. That's what
Yeah.
I'm trying to find out. So I think there were some altercations on the steps. And
Yeah.
maybe not all of those people went inside. So I just want to get an understanding of how much of involvement do they have for them to lose their lives.
I think we'll have to see that on the actual cases, and to see if any of them actually participated in some level of altercation, as you mentioned, at the steps of the U.S. Capitol, to see what is also the violation of potentially federal law, and and that's where we would then work with the U.S. Capitol Police and Washington D.C. Police to determine if there is any level of violation.
Might they be disciplined in some way other than losing their jobs?
I would have to look at what the violation is.
Chief, you've identified 2 SPD officers, is that correct?
That is correct.
Can you tell us anything about them, how long they've been on the department, their ages, anything?
At this time, no, because we don't know if they've done anything wrong. And that is the reality of it. Right now, the officers are one of the officers that had come to us. There was no specific, information that says that they were actually engaged in any part of the insurrection. However, because of the events on Wednesday, it was very clear that I still had to make some level of action to determine until we fully determine what was actually done.
You said that there were social media posts. Are these posts that the officers share themselves? And secondly, did they ever voluntarily give this information to the chain of command at any point you're aware of?
The second part, I don't have the answer to that. The first part, it was a social media post that they posted online.
Chief, Jose Moreno, CNN. What type of protection is being offered to the person that came forward to provide those particular posts as you continue to create that shift in culture and the ability to provide people with a safe outlet for them to report other people? What are you guys doing to protect that and then to encourage that going forward?
Yeah, so, we do not relay the information about who's the specific person that actually relayed that information to us. That is number one, to give some level of protection to that employee. But also it's our level of encouragement and our appreciation for any officer that reports any level of wrongdoing. And so we want to, even for me, my own public acknowledgement of that type of action. And then we're also pushing out our training, which is also a big component to making sure that we, create that foster of good culture in our department for people to report potential issues of violation of policy or law.
Chief,
among
could you
officers.
clarify, was it an actual SPD officer or an SPD employee who brought these photos to your attention? And was it just one person or multiple people that brought it to your attention?
So I know of it being an employee. I can't determine if it's an officer or an employee, but I do know it was an internal. It came through us internally. It actually came up to Chief Mahaffey from the Operations Bureau. And then we actually discussed it on Thursday evening and then presented it to the Office of Police Accountability.
And are those officers on leave now, or what's...
Yes, they're currently on administrative leave.
How does it feel for this to be happening in the department, right? There's been a summer of protests. Clearly there's some officers leaving because of everything that's going on politically. So now to see this happening, how does it feel as interim chief to hold all this?
It's a very difficult situation that we're in. Number one, we did lose quite a few officers throughout this last year, and good officers that are working really hard. And, that has been very difficult for us. Then to potentially have officers that only an allegation, we don't even know if they've done anything wrong, participate maybe in this U.S. Capitol insurrection. And I hope to think that our officers will make good decisions both on duty and off duty. And I'm committed to ensuring that our culture, that we address every aspect of that in our department. And that's the reason why I acted very quickly to ensure that, number one, this gets investigated, and that people know that I'm not afraid to hold people fully accountable if they are doing wrong things. And so I know that people might question, like, did I come out too quick? Because we didn't have everything that is, and the officers might not have done anything wrong. That very well could be. But I feel after Wednesday and seeing something that to me was unprecedented in our history, I couldn't let it just go. And so I had to make an action.
There's also been questions about Mike Solon, who is the head of the Seattle Police Officers Guild. He, in at least one of his tweets, when he was Black Lives Matter, then he said, well, he later tweeted, well, he was saying there were agreements on both sides who were there. There have been calls for his resignation. Where do you stand on that?
That part is the unions. There are the levels of union representation. My belief is that I will not stand for any level of direct action. And what we saw at the U.S. Capitol is that it was such a huge challenge to our democracy, and it doesn't matter if it's left or right. Like, we just cannot have that type of action in our country. And so, that's the stuff that we're focused on, ensuring that doesn't occur. And then internally, if I can't have officers participating and being directly involved in that type of activity as well. So I can only speak to the actions of our officers, and not speak to what the union message might be.
Chief, going back to the comment you made about a lot of officers leaving the force, what percentage of those were already primed for retirement and took an early retirement as opposed to the mass exodus that is being claimed in the area?
You know, I don't have the exact numbers of those that were in the retirement that were actually going to retire no matter what. What I can tell you is that we were actually going to be experiencing one of our lowest years of attrition up until the month of June. And we were in, I don't know the exact number, but we were at, like I said, one of the lowest numbers. And we had a significant amount that finished out the year that left our department. And to me, it's about the equivalent of the amount of officers that we staff either at North Precinct or even two smaller precincts like South or Southwest. And that has been, that has created a significant impact. It is one of, it's not one of the reasons why, but I do know that patrol was already short. And it was one of the first things that I had done was to move 100 officers back to patrol. And it was also to create a community response group that could also be able to supplement patrol and be able to handle calls for service and handle the other things that are going on in our city. So I'm very grateful for everyone stepping up to the plate and being able to also help drive these numbers down when it comes to the shots fired. Because we were not able to really adequately address everything that was going on. So not only did we were able to, that we saw more officers leave, we were also able to get a good response on a lot of calls for service.
Chief, I think we need to ask about the homicide numbers. You said that 49% of the victims, well, it's a larger number, 61% more than in the past. 49% of the victims are black, and they, of course, make up a much smaller part of this city. What about the perpetrators, and are you making any headway in solving these?
Yeah, so we are actually, and that's one of the things that we try to keep track of is how many cases that we're closing that are resolving with bringing justice to the families, and FBI has a way of how they report out clearance rates. At this time, we're trying to make sure that we're meeting the FBI's guidelines of what that clearance rate is. But I can tell you we're above the national average in many of all of the previous years, and a part of that is just good police work. And typically we run into the high 70s of clearance rates, and that's what our detectives are currently working to make sure that they're solving cases and maintaining that high standard.
Are they there now?
Right now, we're just making sure that we're clearing up the numbers to make sure that we're in the FBI's guidelines, but I know that we're pretty close to those same numbers right now.
Have you been contacted by the FBI about this incident with the two officers? And second question, what is the policy around supporting liking images that would involve what happened, the riots in D.C.? Are officers allowed to like an image, and could that be violent?
Yeah, we have a social media policy, and we're currently right now going to be making sure that that's under review to ensure that there's, you always find that when you put a policy out that there could be gaps in that policy, but we would then review to make sure that there's no gaps in those policies. That off-duty conduct is sometimes that we have disciplined officers in the past for that. We've actually fired officers for social media posts that they have presented. And so our policy has been pretty restrictive, but we would have to then look at to see if there is anything that we're missing in that policy, just like kind of the likes or other things that might be associated with that. Oh, no, they have not. They have not.
Can you talk about some of the trends in last year's homicides? I know the King County Prosecutor Attorney's Office is really concerned about domestic violence. In years past, we've seen a lot of homicides in homeless encampments, but this year it seems DVs really take in.
Yeah, so, there was a big concern in 2020 because, obviously more people are home, that domestic violence, calls for service go up. Our homicide in 2019, we had 6 homicides for domestic violence. Last year we had in 2020 we had 7. So it wasn't a significant increase. We saw increases in homicide in general, but one more than the year before isn't established some real big issue or underlying issue. We did see deaths in homeless, in homicides in homeless actually go down. I believe the number that we have is 4, but we will actually provide a little bit more detail in that to you. But yeah, typically in the year before we did see homeless, or in 2019 we did see homeless deaths up a little bit, but last year it doesn't appear that trend still continued.
Mike Solin's been now heavily criticized by the mayor, former Seattle Police Chief Carmen Best, and many others online about his Capitol insurrection tweets. In your opinion, has that tweet hurt SPD's relationship with the citizens of Seattle or lawmakers here as well? And do you believe Mike Solin is still fit to be the president of the SPOG union?
You know, I run the police department, and I want to make that clear. Mike Solin does not run the police department. He oversees the union that does look at wages, working conditions, and benefits. And if there are statements that do challenge the levels of trust with our community, but let's realize that I actually run the department, and I am going to make sure that I hold officers accountable for any action that is not in the same values of our police department. But I know every day officers are doing amazing work, and I believe that all they want to do is just serve this community to the best of their ability, and that's what we're committed to.
Will you be able to work with Mike Solin moving forward?
I mean, he is the union president at this time, and I will be working with Mike Solin to address any other things that we need to do as a city, as a department.
Mr. Concern? You have talked about this a little bit, but what was your first reaction when you saw what was happening in D.C.? And I ask this because many of the people who were storming the Capitol, I believe, are people who support Blue Lives and have made that very clear. And yet here they were reaching the Capitol and facing a force of the Capitol Police. 2 of these members, I believe, died. I know one died, and very publicly we know about it. I think another one died. What were you feeling as you were watching that in those first moments?
Well, honestly, the things around, I think what you mentioned is, people supporting like kind of the Blue Lives and that kind of stuff. Wasn't thinking of it. I was just thinking how horrified to watch our society and watch people literally storm the U.S. Capitol. It cannot. There doesn't matter what they support. Doesn't matter. That cannot happen. We cannot have that in any level of our society. And so, there was a lot of frustration and anger and feelings internally, because it just, we find ourselves in such a divided society right now. And I think that we just have to find ways that we can unite again, so we unite with each other. And so that's, and as a police chief, and as having the opportunity to sit in this role, that's what I'm committed to. That is what, that's what the department needs to be pushing, is that how we build relationships with our community. And I can't have any actions of racism that can stem or could be part of that issue. So I'm going to continue to work to address all of those types of issues, and are committed to working with our community to make this the best city we could possibly have. One more question?
Concerning that the president of the police union shares such a sentiment that is so counter to what it is that you're trying to foster, which is unity and progress in terms of the relationship with the police and the many protests that we have around the city.
I think sometimes, every day we're dealing with, some sort of protest. That's the Seattle way. We know that occurs. We know that happens. It's one of the things that makes the city great. We also do have, and we are dealing with different, sometimes direct action work that has focused on destruction and violence too. And I've denounced that level of violence as well, that has no message, that has no focus on pushing something that is positive and addressing, whether it's supporting Black lives or supporting something like we have all sorts of different causes, environmental causes, or whatever that might be. And that's what we have to be able to do as a society, is to denounce the things that are wrong when it comes to like that direct action. And I've said that before, and I will also denounce what happened at the U.S. Capitol. And that's the type of action that we've got to be able to come out publicly about. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it, everybody. Thanks. Happy New Year.
You're watching News Now from Fox. That was the interim Seattle Police Chief, Adrian Diaz, providing a little bit of an update on a couple of his officers out there who attended those Capitol protests on Wednesday of last week. An investigation is ongoing right now. It sounds like at least one of those officers had posted to social media that they were there. So this is a story we will continue to follow here on News Now from Fox, bringing you these updates from across the country in their entirety as soon as we get them. I'm Daytona Everett. Thank you so much for joining us on this Monday morning. We've got a lot of breaking news that's coming out right now. I do want to bring you this tweet coming from Chad Wolf, the acting secretary of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. This is talking about Inauguration Day, a statement you can see on the left right there. I'll read it out for you. He said, in light of events of the past week and the evolving security landscape leading up to the inauguration, and at the recommendation of Secret Service Director James Murray, I have instructed the U.S. Secret Service to begin the National Special Security Event operations for the 2021 inauguration effective Wednesday, January 13th, instead of January 19th. Our federal, state, and local partners will continue to coordinate their plans and position resources for this important event. So this just coming out moments ago from the Department of Homeland Security. No official word yet of a date change for the inauguration, but with this statement coming in from Chad Wolf, it looks like things may or may not be in the works. We're following all of these stories here on News Now, where I'm going to send some of you off to a 2-minute commercial break, but just giving you a little bit of a heads up. The California Governor Gavin Newsom just got off the podium. We played out an update for him as California is seeing extremely, extremely high case numbers. Even 2 gorillas being diagnosed with COVID-19. One gorilla also had symptoms, and they are trying to figure out the root of those COVID-19 infections. I'm also taking a look at Chicago is speaking right now, and then Los Angeles County as well. We're going to bring those to you in their entirety. But the big story right now still seems to be these protests and investigations that are going on with the FBI. Fox 5 DC's Lindsay Watts actually spoke with the FBI regarding the latest on the Capitol Hill riot investigation from the FBI's standpoint. So this is an interesting conversation. I'll play it out for you, and then we'll get to some of these live events as well. I'm going to send some of you off to a 2-minute commercial break. When you come back, we got more for you here on News Now from Fox.
Yep, I'm the assistant director in charge of the Washington field office. So I'm the head of the office here in Washington, D.C.
Okay. So can you start just by telling me what the FBI is doing right now in terms of this investigation?
We are 24/7, full bore, extensive work going on right now on the investigation side. And there's so many different facets of this investigation right now that we're working in conjunction with our local partners, state, local, federal partners, U.S. Attorney's Office, DOJ, collecting evidence, doing interviews, leads, running down tools that we're looking at on video and social messaging. The tips that just keep pouring in from the public. I cannot stress enough how that's absolutely fantastic for us, because the American public are stepping forward and providing us those tips, which we look at every single one of them. If people don't think that we do, we are looking at every single one of them in the manner we can, because they are pouring in right now, which is absolutely fantastic. So keep them coming. We want those tips. We need those tips, and we can either provide you with the number, I can say it now or whatever, as to what the the call line is, but it's 1-800-CALL-FBI, and then it's www.fbi.gov/US Capital, and it's capital with an O.
How many tips?
We got over about 50,000 right now, social media tips, digital media tips, everything. And people, they're sending stuff to MPD as well, and our other partners. We're ingesting that information in to us as well, because we're all working together, and we're just working as one big team. It's great.
How many arrests and how many people are still outstanding who've been identified?
Yeah, so currently we have 9 in custody right now, and there's several more that are papered and we're looking for, and then there are a lot more to come too. This is just the tip of the iceberg with this investigation, I'll tell you.
Are you looking for every single person who entered the Capitol?
We're looking for every single person that we can identify that entered the Capitol, correct. And we will, with our prosecutors, make that determination as to what they may face for criminal charges.
Mm-hmm. Could there be a case where someone went into the Capitol and is not facing criminal charges?
Well, we always let facts and evidence lead us to charging, and we will work with the U.S. Attorney's Office and DOJ to determine if the person did something criminal. There's always intent, and there's other evidence that comes into play. And we are cognizant of that. We're the collectors of the evidence, and that's what we do, right? And the prosecutors determine what the prosecution phase is. So, but we do not leave any stone unturned. And I promise you, and I promise the American people, there'll be no stone left unturned in this investigation.
Any new information about the pipe bomber?
It's still an ongoing investigation. We're still looking at that. We have the wanted posters out for the information. Any and all information leading to, I believe there's a reward. I think it's $50,000. Sorry, there's a 50 with an extra O in there. So hopefully someone comes forward and provides that and wants that reward, because we need to get that individual, he or she, off the streets.
Considering all the circumstances, what could be the worst charges that someone would be facing?
We're looking at all charges, everything that we can possibly look at. I know there's been a lot of information about the Sedition Act out there. That's probably why you're asking the question. We are not closing the book on anything. But like I said, the facts is what we follow, right? We gather evidence, we do interviews, we cover leads, and what the facts tell us, and then working with the prosecutors will determine what a person is looking at for criminal charges or not being criminally charged.
Could there be additional charges for those already charged?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We do not just shut the book on them being charged. What we got right now, there might be other charges forthcoming with those individuals. Yes.
And obviously people could be looking at murder charges, correct?
All charges are on the books at this point.
I know it's been stated there's been no evidence that Antifa was involved in doing this. Has that changed?
At this time, there is no indication of Antifa involvement.
An interesting conversation right there with our Fox DC affiliate, and more to come from them as well about those FBI investigations. I'm getting a live look here from Arizona as Governor Ducey has stepped up to the podium. He's addressing the COVID-19 pandemic, but it's likely he'll address other issues as well, including the chaos at the Capitol. Thanks for joining us here, and also so many other feeds that we can't even get to, so many live events today. So you don't want to step away from us. We're bringing you all the news that you need to know, COVID-19 and politically too.
Stark contrast to the violent and destructive rioting at our nation's capital just 2 days prior. It was a sickening day in Washington, D.C. that no American will ever forget. In the United States of America, violence and vandalism have no place in the people's house. Perpetrators should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Let us condemn it and resolve that it never happens again. With that in mind, let us treat each other this year as one of our nation's greatest presidents, Abraham Lincoln, suggested, with malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right. Let us strive on to finish the work we are in. And Arizona will do its part to bind up the nation's wounds. Here we will conduct ourselves with integrity and respect for each other and for the United States Constitution. As for our work here, all agree the pandemic remains the most significant threat we face, and it will require vigilant attention for months to come. The risk is still serious, and so is the pressure on our hospitals and medical personnel. Even so, we should take encouragement where we find it, starting with the breakthrough that will change everything. If last year was a virus, this year will be the year of the vaccine. 2020 threw a lot at us. It was a time we'll all remember, but not very fondly. Yet in a time of trial, loss, worry, and disruption, we kept our bearings and never lost heart. It's been one of those turns in life when perseverance makes all the difference, when we had to show just how resilient we are. We've also had reminders, as if any were needed, of why medicine and nursing are so respected among life's great callings. I think of Edmund Baker, a doctor and Army veteran, who for years has cared for patients in the medically underserved parts of Arizona. Like so many other doctors, he stayed on call and has never relented, so that no matter who you are or where you live, you can get the care you need. Then there's Regina Villa, a nurse at Valley Wise Health Medical Center. The mission, says Nurse Villa, is truly to care for all people. It doesn't matter who you are. It's been a time when COVID patients can't even see their families, and nurses can feel like the only friend at their side. Nurse Villa is one of the thousands who have met this crisis with courage, grace, and kindness. And we can never overlook the incredible service of the Arizona National Guard. Consider just the single example of Will Smith, a medic who in 2019 came home from deployment in Iraq. With the pandemic, Will found himself back in a Black Hawk helicopter, delivering COVID testing kits to tribal nations. That was Will's idea of a break from his regular job at Scottsdale Osborne Medical Center. In so many ways, an extremely tough year.
In weeks and months, please look over us. Please guide us. Please provide us wisdom. Please be with these great leaders who serve their communities in this great Mississippi State Capitol. Dear Heavenly Father, please be with Lieutenant Governor Hoseman as he leads the Senate forward. Please be with Speaker Gunn as he leads our House of Representatives. Dear Heavenly Father, please be with all of our elected officials in our state. Let us recognize that this is a moment for us to come together, for us to recognize that there are going to be differences on issues, but those differences make us stronger, not weaker. And our ability to debate those issues in a public setting is what makes this state and this country a great place. Dear Heavenly Father, let us all recognize that the past must be the past, but our path forward is to focus on our future. Dear Heavenly Father, we are so blessed that we live in the greatest state, in the greatest country in the history of mankind. Dear Heavenly Father, please look over us, watch over us. Let us understand that it is our job to do your will, not our individual wills. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us together at this point. Dear Heavenly Father, most of all, thank you for sending your Son, Jesus, to die on the cross to save all of us from our sins, that whosoever believeth in him shall have everlasting life. It is in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen. Amen. Thank you all.
Wanted to cut into that really quickly here from Mississippi. We're going to go back to Governor Doug Ducey in Arizona for his State of the State address.
Businesses to run and employees who depend on them. There are lots of men and women who don't have the option of remote work and don't receive uninterrupted direct deposits. To make a living, they have to show up somewhere. And if the doors are closed, then at a certain point, they are never going to open again. If we're really all in this together, then we have to appreciate that for many families, lockdown doesn't spell inconvenience. It spells catastrophe, zero income, inability to make a payment, eviction, foreclosure, and real personal anguish. Often these past 10 months, likewise, I met in this office with public health experts who were describing the broader impacts of COVID-19 beyond the disease itself. Opioid abuse, alcoholism, addiction, mental health issues, the sheer loneliness of isolation, suicide. There has been no daily count of these human costs, but they are real and they are devastating. And extreme measures by well-intentioned people have unintended consequences that actually do far more harm than good. We never did a lockdown in Arizona. We were targeted and thoughtful. So some have asked, why not end the public health emergency? It's simple. Because we are in a public health emergency. I've been entrusted by the people of Arizona with this responsibility. I'm not going to hand over the keys to a small group of mayors who have expressed every intention of locking down their cities. And by the way, look at the experience of the other states that did lock down. What do they have to show for their strict mandates and orders? They're still dealing with the worst of it, just as we are. I'm well aware that taking the measured, steady, responsible approach will continue to invite criticism from all directions that we're doing too much or not enough. The critics can say what they want, but the path I've outlined is the right path for Arizona. Here's the short of it. Arizona has taken the measured course, and all the same strengths that carried us through our worst days will carry us forward. All 50 states are focused now on saving lives, distributing the vaccine, and adding jobs. And in meeting these challenges, no state is better prepared than Arizona. In this new session, the legislature and I have some big pieces of business to complete. and I'll soon be sending the details of my proposals for 2021. But today, I know that many Arizonans are especially concerned about their kids and about their jobs. So let me begin there. It's been a small mercy of this pandemic that the virus is least likely to harm our children, although there are exceptions. Of course, their teachers are a different matter, and that's why we're making sure that teachers receive the vaccine as quickly as possible. Across our state, students have been kept out of their classrooms for long enough. They've lost out on childhood experiences that can't be duplicated on a computer screen. In strange, difficult circumstances, parents and teachers have done their resourceful best. But it's time to get our students back where they belong. With every public health professional, from Dr. Fauci and the CDC on down, saying that the safest place for kids to be is in school, we will not be funding empty seats or allowing schools to remain in a perpetual state of closure. Children still need to learn, even in a pandemic. By necessity, during this emergency, many parents have been more engaged than ever in the daily education of their children. Quite a few have found temporary educational options they want to make permanent. It's their right. Public policy should keep pace and empower them to make that choice. But still, other kids have fallen behind. There's been severe learning loss. Kids have missed out on so much. So let's put our resources on getting them caught up. Before COVID, we had an achievement gap in our schools, and it's only gotten worse. It's a problem detailed in a report just last week from one of the state's leading business organizations, with data showing the gap in student achievement often falling squarely down economic and racial lines. Distance learning has not been good for these students, who often don't have Wi-Fi or a laptop available. So starting now, let's direct resources to helping these children catch up. Summer school, longer school days, one-on-one targeted instruction, tutoring. It should be our goal that every student graduates high school on time and at grade level. This is consistent with the education innovation for which Arizona is known. At the heart of that movement is the idea that every child, regardless of background, is entitled to a great education and all the opportunities that come with it. Our independent spirit, after all, is one reason why so many people feel drawn to Arizona. They see that spirit as well in our respect for hardworking taxpayers and for Americans tired of living in states with high taxes, heavy regulation, low growth, and fading opportunity. Arizona has become the destination. And they're still coming to Arizona in 2021 because during the pandemic, we never took our small businesses or their workers for granted. As bad as things got, we're recovering fast. New businesses and residents have been added by the thousands. At this time last year, we were ahead of 45 other states in job creation and personal income growth. Today, we're still top 5, but some Arizonans are struggling, and it's got to be our priority to help them with a growing economy and more jobs. Every year I've been governor, we've improved income taxes in the taxpayer's favor. We've simplified the code, lowered all rates, protected them against inflation, and eliminated an entire tax bracket. In all of this, we've proven that our government can fulfill every obligation and answer the unexpected needs of a growing state without raising taxes. My goal has been to make Arizona the best place in America to live, work, and do business by letting Arizonans keep more of their hard-earned money. And having come this far, as other states chase away opportunity with their new taxes, why on earth would we ever want to follow their failed and depressing example? So I propose in this session, we work together to reform and lower taxes and preserve Arizona's good name as a responsible, competitive state. On tax reform, let's think big. In the coming weeks, legislators and I will have a lot more to talk over. There's general agreement, for instance, on COVID liability protection, so that a statewide emergency doesn't line the pockets of trial attorneys with frivolous lawsuits. There's also an opportunity for a modernized gaming compact that will bring in more revenue for our tribal nations and our state budget. Among other agenda items requiring our attention, let's work on broadband expansion, greater access to telemedicine, better roads and bridges, continuing to be a global leader on water innovation, better equipment and training for law enforcement, criminal justice reform, and guarding against wildfires so we stay on top of that ever-present risk. With remote learning by many state employees, we also have the chance to further limit the size, cost, and footprint of government. Let's truly shrink government by eliminating unnecessary state buildings and saving taxpayer dollars so we can prioritize areas of need, like educating our kids, taking care of our sick, and keeping our neighborhoods safe. We can complete all this and more in 2021, and I am ready. Our whole state is ready to get back on a rising path. Through the trials of 2020, we've kept our balance. We met every test. And even in an election year, we showed the best of our state's bipartisan tradition. If Arizonans are looking to this year with a feeling of accomplishment and optimism, it is because they've witnessed the strength of their fellow citizens. Despite everything 2020 threw at us in the face, have demonstrated the true state of our state. From our frontline medical workers, teachers, moms and dads, public safety and first responders, small business people, election day workers, grocery store employees, and National Guard, we've seen heroism, sacrifice, service, and acts of kindness, large and small. The state of our state is not only strong, it's resilient. So let us act in that spirit. We must be hopeful for the future, but we cannot forget the challenges we face in the immediate. The nurses and doctors, tired and exhausted as they work overtime to save lives. The Arizonans who are grieving loved ones lost. We must all do our part by doing what we know works, following public health, wearing a mask, and practicing personal responsibility. With resilience and compassion, we move forward, allowing nothing to get in our way and showing, in the end, the best kind of unity there is, the unity of caring about one another. Thanks for listening, and God bless.
Well, that was Governor Doug Ducey. In the very beginning, he referenced, obviously, those Capitol riots from last week, but then went on to talk about his coronavirus response and the response of the state of Arizona. Arizona hasn't really made that many changes when it comes to restrictions for COVID-19, and it doesn't look like any are going to be put into place anytime soon either. The governor just focused on what the economy is going to be looking like going forward here in 2021. Again, thank you for joining us here on News Now from Fox, that 2021 State of the State address in Arizona. We got a couple other things to get to here on News Now from Fox. I am going to send some of you off to a 2-minute commercial break, but when you come back, I have some stories talking about this the investigation that is ongoing with the FBI. We have some submissions from our sister stations across the country who are interviewing FBI officials, and then also preparations going on at the Capitol ahead of Inauguration Day, which is quickly approaching right now. It's the 11th, and that will be on the 20th. So we're just 9 days away. I am going to start off now, though, and bring us out to an update in Los Angeles County for COVID-19. Earlier today, we heard from Governor Gavin Newsom, where cases are obviously spiking in the state of California. But the interesting storyline today was 2 gorillas getting diagnosed with COVID-19, and then another one is symptomatic. So not sure what the root of those cases are, and that's what the investigation is going to be going into. So we'll listen into Los Angeles County and then play out a couple of these other stories and interviews for you as well. I'm Daytona Everett. Go ahead and give us a follow on Twitter at News Now Fox. I'm at Daytona News Now, and I have some really great colleagues here who are going to be stepping up here in just about the next 20 minutes to bring you more coverage across the country.
Finally, a brief update on vaccination, and then we'll take questions. DHS workers are continuing to receive now their second-round doses of the COVID vaccine this week. As of Friday, 3,000 DHS workers had received their second dose of the Pfizer vaccine, and about 14,000 had received their first dose. More vaccine clinics are underway today and will continue over the next several weeks. Because it can take weeks for the vaccination to provide the appropriate and full immune protection, it remains important that people, even if they've received a vaccine, that they keep doing what's needed to reduce transmission, to protect themselves in wearing a mask, but also because you can still be infectious to others even if you've received that vaccine, to reduce transmission to others. So please, if you have received a vaccine, we're very glad that you've received that and that you have that opportunity for protection, but you still need to wear a mask and you still need to do all those basic public health practices to avoid spreading the virus to those around you. I urge and caution everyone within the community to keep up those practices and to not get tired. I know it's been a long road, but we're getting close, and we still need everyone to remain vigilant with the practices for the sake of the health of all of those around us. And we'll now take questions.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you wish to ask a question, please press 1, then 0 on your telephone keypad. You may withdraw your question at any time by repeating the 1-0 command. If you are using a speakerphone, please pick up the handset before pressing the numbers. Once again, for questions, you may press 1, then 0. And it's also been requested for reporters if you can limit yourself to 1 to 2 questions only. Thank you. Our first question from the line of Bernard Wolfson with Kaiser Health News. Please go ahead. The line is open.
Yes, good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good.
I wanted to ask, I'm not sure which of you want to answer this question, but the California Department of Public Health order of January 5th, among other things, says that hospitals with capacity are required to accept transfers from hospitals in other counties that are overwhelmed. And I'm wondering to what extent overwhelmed hospitals in Los Angeles County have been requesting such support from hospitals in other counties, and the degree to which those requests are being accommodated, and by which counties.
Yeah, hi, thanks for the question. The CDPH order that you reference says that if a hospital is in crisis care, that receiving hospitals must accept those patients from that sending crisis care hospital on a lateral transfer. There are no hospitals within Los Angeles County that have still declared crisis standards of care, and we have also not received any requests from outside of the county to laterally transfer individuals from hospitals in crisis standards of care. We'll take the next question.
Our next question from the line of Claudia Pisciuta with KNX News Radio. Please go ahead. The line is open.
Have any hospitals at this point notified the county that they're planning to go into crisis care mode? And also, what is the total testing capacity before the closure of the VA and Dodger Stadium sites? What will capacity be dropping down to? It's obvious at this point that we're not testing enough if, about 1 in 4 or 5 people who are tested are coming out positive. Are you concerned about dropping capacity now given the amount of cases that we're seeing? Thank you.
We have not been notified by any hospitals that they have declared crisis standards of care. Hospitals are not required to notify us that they're thinking about it. And we often have conversations with CDPH, with DPH, through the EMS agency, through the MOAC to support hospitals, to try to help them with whatever is the trouble that they're having on the ground and try to help troubleshoot those problems, whether it be oxygen supply, staffing, resources, assistance with transferring patients. But those conversations are all in the context of contingency care and as hospitals raise them. So again, no hospitals have notified us that they have declared. And then on your second question, the volume of completed tests at the 2 sites in question, Dodger Stadium and the VA, they run about 87,000 tests per week. That's been consistent over the last several months. It represents about 1/3 of the total testing capacity within the geography of the County of Los Angeles. So typically on a given week within the community testing sites, so again, not all testing, but the community testing sites, there's about 275,000 tests performed per week, and these 2 sites make up 87,000. And I know that the city is aware that there will be implications of these closures, and they're thinking through how to be able to ramp up additional sites in the near future and try to bridge to that period of time and ideally make it as short as possible. And we will continue conversations with the city to that regard, as well as trying to look at what we can do within the county as well to ramp up testing access. I agree that this is a really critical time to make sure that people in the midst of a surge can have robust access to testing. The county had been in the midst of working to ramp up, increase the total number of tests.
And we do have another live event coming in with Congressman Tim Ryan holding a virtual briefing, giving updates on the investigation on the Capitol riots of last week.
And we're going to just continue to dig and find out. And you'll be the first to know as soon as we can tell you.
Next question is for Annie Greer from CNN.
Hi, Congressman Ryan. Thank you again for taking the time to do this. There's so much to ask about here, as you're saying, there's so much is unfolding, and it's given the time that we're in. We want to look back and think about the investigation, but there's also so much coming forward, as you mentioned with inauguration. What can you tell us about what plans are being put in place to increase security, to more so than that was already put in the budget for inauguration in light of what happened last week?
Well, there's going to be additional money that we're going to have to provide through the Legislative Branch Appropriations Committee. We're going to have to figure out how to make that happen, but I'm committed to making that happen. I know Speaker Pelosi is committed, Chairwoman Rosa DeLauro. We're all committed to making that happen, whatever the number may end up being. You're probably, if you're in DC and you're out and about, you're probably seeing some of the global fencing, creating a perimeter of an unscalable wall. We have activated a number of National Guard units and from a variety of different states. It will be a significant number. That number will be based on the threats that are out there, and those numbers will be significant. I can just tell you that. I don't know if we want to release any specific numbers as of yet, but it will be significant. There will be a good deal of security in addition to the Capitol Police, in addition to the Secret Service, in addition to the Park Police. We will make sure that Washington, D.C. Is secure for the administration of the oath of office to Vice President Biden, and that everybody there will be safe and secure, and we will have a smooth transition of power. The states have been incredibly generous. And mind you, and I do want to make this point because I didn't really think of it today until I was talking to General Hokanson, that the National Guards, they obviously have responsibility in their own states. And now we're calling on some of them to help here. And this is also probably going to take away from some of the vaccine distribution issues in some of these states where the National Guard was involved. So when we're thinking about what these domestic terrorists or the rioters or the insurrectionists or however we want to call them, definitely domestic terrorists as far as what was happening last week. But they are continuing to pull resources away from us being able to deal with the virus and the distribution of the vaccines. So this is having a ripple effect throughout the entire country as we begin to try to deal with these surges in coronavirus cases and deaths and people in ICUs and all of that. So I thought that was an interesting point that maybe all of you could help amplify too. This is not just about Washington, D.C. This is going to have a national impact because of that.
Next question goes to Chris Marquette.
Hey, Congressman Ryan, thanks for taking the time. Appreciate it. Recently, you said you supported the union's call for, Acting Chief Pittman and Assistant Chief Thomas to resign. What is it like working hand in hand in preparation for the inauguration with them, after, calling for them to resign, essentially? And number two is who is ultimately to blame for this miscalculation of intelligence? I mean, I know Chairperson Lofgren spoke at length with Chief Sund, former House Sergeant at Arms Paul Irving on January 5th. And the day before that, it was, the day before the insurrection. And they both assured her that, hey, everything's good. We have, we can efficiently get help. It seemed as if, they were saying that, everything was fine. And then, come Wednesday, and also, according to you, making assurances to you. So I was just wondering, how do you go forward with Acting Chief Pittman, with what you've said and what the union has called that, saying that they do not have trust in their leadership? And one other thing is, I know there have been a lot of, mental health questions about, how Capitol Police officers are doing and other officers, MPD, who have assisted and everything like that. What's the way forward on that front as well from your vantage point? Thank you.
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. First, look, we're in a very difficult time right now. This is, yes, I do think we need a complete change at the top, but we've got an immediate job to do. And I think the interim chief is committed to doing that. And, we've got to move forward, with who we have in place right now. I think that's going to be important because we do need a chain of command. We do need people in charge. I think there's enough people to make sure we do it the right way. And look, I talked to the interim chief on January 6th, and it was not a very pleasant conversation. I couldn't get a hold of Chief's son, and I spoke to her, and you could imagine, what I had to say about taking care of business. And so, but here we are, and we've got to just come together now and rally around each other to make sure that this is a safe inauguration, and we're committed to do that. We got to find out a lot of the blame game, a lot of comments. I saw Chief's son interview, read with great interest what he had to say. You're right. We were given assurances. I was personally given assurances the day before, as was Chairwoman Lofgren, about being adequately prepared, no problems, and we had enough backup and all the rest. So we're very disappointed by that. And again, back to the first question, it's about trying to establish some trust again with the Capitol Police because of everything that has been said and done. And we're going to continue to do that to tease out exactly what these conversations look like and who was involved with them. And we need to have conversations with all of those different entities, from the mayor's office to Chief's son, to the sergeant at arms, who we can't seem to find, and all of these other people that were involved. That's gonna take a little bit of time. That's gonna be an investigation or oversight, or however we want to call it, and that needs to get done, get to the bottom of that. But for our purposes now are to make sure that there aren't any bureaucratic snafus, any holdups, any delays, that there is approval already before we even get to an inauguration day, with as many National Guardsmen and women that we could possibly need, that they are ready and teed up and close by to be able to stop anything that may potentially happen, without having to make, other than a phone call or a text, send them over. Here we are, come to this area. Other than that, everything should be teed up and ready to go with equipment, with the rules on use of force and what that may look like, and making sure that all the guardsmen are prepared. I will be going down to talk to the guardsmen tomorrow and Wednesday when I'm down there, as well as the Capitol Police. Gus is going to take me around to make sure that they know that, we love them and we support them, and we're going to be here for them. And to the question about, what's going on with the trauma and the stress and the post-traumatic stress, I've done a lot of work in this area with regard to veterans with post-traumatic stress. We're pulling in a number of contacts that I've developed over the years to come in and both work with the Capitol Police, the Center for Mind-Body Medicine in Washington, D.C. They've done work around the world in war zones. They've done work with police departments. They've done work with veterans around post-traumatic stress and dealing with trauma. They're going to be involved. They've already been connected to the department. We're also going to be working with the House Wellbeing Office, which we set up in the last couple of years. They do a number of things for staff, because there were so many staff members that were affected by this, straight trauma. And so we're going to be asking people from around the country who are involved in different organizations, primarily those who do work with veterans, to be involved and to help us through this time, to make sure that the Capitol Police are prepared. And we're trying to make sure that they're getting adequate rest. You got to prepare, but you also got to be rested in order to be prepared for what's coming. So it's a really delicate balancing act. But again, it's important for the American people to recognize the level of destruction that these folks are trying to administer to our republic, and to law enforcement in particular, rank and file members who we all love and support, and now are being really put to the test because of what's going on here. The administration of the vaccines and all of these different things are being affected by this. So American people should know that this is not an isolated incident. This is affecting real people. We have a suicide already with the Capitol Police, and we want to make sure that the rank and file members are safe. So I appreciate you asking that question, and we can keep you posted as to as these different organizations get engaged as to who they are and what they're doing.
Next question goes to Ben Siegel from ABC.
Thanks for doing this, Congressman. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hear you fine.
Would you mind clarifying something you said earlier in the conversation about Capitol Police officers being suspended and one being arrested? Is that what exactly is the nature of that episode? And then also, there was a report today that some Capitol Police officers had turned in their guns because they had to do with, so concerned about what they might do to themselves and concerns about trauma. Is that something specifically that you have heard of, that you've discussed with the interim chief?
I heard that after I talked to the chief, and I hadn't heard anything more about that. I heard that from some of you in the press who mentioned it to me, but I've not had any information on that. Back to the original question, I know that there were 2 people suspended. One was the selfie officer, and another was an officer who had to put a MAGA hat on and started directing some people around. I don't know if letting them in, letting them out, exactly what it was, but it was the interim chief determined that to be immediate, qualifying for immediate suspension. And then the other one, I can get more information, maybe report back to you on it. But somebody was arrested, and I can get you more information on that as that unfolds. I believe it was, but I should not go too far down that road. But the point is that the main point, we'll get you the information. But the main point is the Capitol Police are looking at everybody involved that could have potentially facilitated at a big level or a small level in any way. Those are being investigated now, and I think it's important that you know that they're trying to crack down on any of that, because again, we need all hands on deck moving forward, and we can't have somebody protecting on the inauguration that was not doing the job during the January 6th event.
And just one quick follow-up for you. Have you come across any specific evidence that some of these rioters were targeting specific members of Congress beyond these sorts of videos of people shouting things like, where's Schumer, where's Pelosi, where's the vice president? Has there been any specific evidence found or uncovered that suggests that?
No. Not as of yet, but again, everything's being reviewed now, but I haven't had anything in particular to any particular member other than some of the leadership that you mentioned.
Next question goes to Sabrina Eaton from the Cleveland Plain Dealer.
Hi, Congressman.
Sabrina, if you don't bring up the Cleveland Browns, I'm going to be very upset.
Well, we're very psyched about them. I'm
okay.
Sure psyched but, I wanted to ask just a couple quick things. You had said, did you say that a Capitol Police officer was arrested for his role in this riot?
I believe it was, but let me clarify and get that exact information for you, Sabrina. I believe that it was either a Capitol Police person or it was a National Guards person who worked for the Capitol Police as well. Let me get some clarification on that. That was actually when I told the chief, I said, you got to let the press know about this. So I should have done a little more due diligence before I jumped on here. So I apologize for that. But that was actually when she was telling me that was actually why I said you need to make sure that the press understands what's going on here, because I think it's important that the American people know that you're cleaning house here and trying to take control. So we'll get the exact information and get it released to you. I thought they were going to get that out today at some point, and that's what I encouraged them to do. But we'll make sure we get that information to you. Again, as long as it's not going to affect any part of an investigation.
Okay, I also wanted to just ask, there's going to be votes on impeachment and the 25th Amendment. What are your views on that?
Well, my hope is that the unanimous consent issue today, with the 25th Amendment would have been able to be accepted, that we would have had Democrat and Republican support for Vice President Pence to begin the process of the 25th Amendment. I feel like that's the cleanest way for us to get rid of the president and to reduce the imminent harm that he can cause. And I'll be supporting the resolution tomorrow, and then impeachment on Wednesday I will also be supporting. I just, think, as many of you know, my wife is a first grade school teacher. And when we have this conversation, this gets organized around, you need consequences for your actions. Set a terrible precedent for the president of the United States to foment an insurrection, direct people to go overturn a legal election in the nation's capital, in the Congress have no response. And but trust me, I understand people who say, well, it's just going to be a few more days and then he's going to be gone. But we also have to look forward to future presidents. Also, I think it's important that a lot of our Republican colleagues have an opportunity to communicate to their constituents just how firmly committed they are to the Constitution and to the Democratic Republic and to the process of peaceful transition of power, and be able to cast their vote either for saying that the president's behavior is completely unacceptable, to join with all of the technology companies and tech platforms and the PGA who are going to not use his clubs, golf clubs anymore, the Wall Street Journal, even Republican senators like Toomey and others are coming out. They should have the opportunity to record their vote for posterity as to where they stand. And I think that's important as well. But we've got to send a message that there are consequences. This is unacceptable behavior, and we want the president out because we can't trust that he would not do something that could threaten members of Congress, the vice president, anybody else, or the process of the peaceful transition of power. They should have the opportunity to do that, and they will. And we'll see where they stand.
Thank you.
We're going to Ryan Nobles from CNN next.
Congressman, can you hear me? Oh,
yeah.
Here we go.
Hey,
okay,
fine.
Two questions for you. First, if you could maybe expand a little bit on the phone call that you had with the chief of the National Guard, and in particular, was he able to offer any clarity on the conversations between he and the chief of the Capitol Police? Because it seems to be a lot of confusion between the two of them as to whether or not they were in a position to be called up, whether they were not in a position to be called up. Based on what you've seen from the interviews that the Capitol Police chief has given compared to your phone conversation, do you feel like you have any clarity as to exactly how everything went down on that day? And then I have a follow-up when you're done.
Not yet. I didn't speak to the chief of the DC National Guard. This was the chief of the National Guard Bureau, which is kind of the umbrella group for all of the state National Guards. He wasn't brought in until later in the day, evidently, when they started talking about going outside of DC with additional help from additional states. So he was brought in, it's my understanding that he was brought in a little bit later, and so didn't have a whole lot of information as to the back and forth between the chief and the DC National Guard, between the chief and the sergeant at arms and all of those other conversations. So we've got some work to do to try to really tease that out, and we're in the process of getting that information. But those are all going to be very key conversations. Again, the lag in the chief's original request, as he stated, and that the Department of Army stated, and then the time frame, the lag between when even the DC National Guard was able to get there, and then the original 340 that were activated, and then later the full 1,100. the lag time was just completely inadequate, and we need that's what we're trying to learn from this is like, how do we cut through that? And in part, it's going to be to have a lot more National Guardsmen on the ground to be able to act quickly, to support and if needed, and they'll be around for that, so that mistake won't be made again. We're going to make sure that.
Okay, and then to follow up, there does seem to also be some confusion as to the guidance Capitol Police were given as to the use of lethal force. Have you gotten any insight into that? And then extending it out to the inauguration and beyond, is that going to be an emphasis in the planning and the security of the inauguration to make clear when lethal force is acceptable and exactly the type of lethal force that can be used?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a background in law enforcement. My job is to ask the right questions, and I believe that we have been asking the right questions. And so what we're understanding is they have, especially the National Guard, they have rules on the use of force. And those rules basically start with and lead with de-escalation. And then it evolves into something that looks a lot like self-protection and self-defense, and then moves on to defending others who may be in jeopardy, and then it moves on to deadly force at some point. And I want to make sure, and I said this very clearly on the conversation this afternoon with the National Guard, that there needs to be absolute clarity that if a mob starts pushing through a gate or pushing through a checkpoint, what are the responsibilities of that National Guardsman? Now they are there to monitor and shore up. It is the police officers and police departments and others in law enforcement that would actually be charged with dealing with that particular situation. But again, and I said earlier on TV that, there's a lot of Americans saying, why wasn't anyone shot? Why weren't there warning shots? Because clearly it had moved past any possibility of de-escalation. And clearly lives were being put at risk. People were already getting trampled. Cops were getting squeezed in the doors. The mob rule had taken over. So I just want to, not necessarily for my purposes, but I figure if they got to explain it to me, everyone else is going to know about it. What are those levels? And we're not just talking about securing a building. We're talking about securing a building in which the electors and the elections are being certified. This is the machinery of our democracy that would be interrupted. And so does that aspect play into how they should respond? So it's not just a normal interaction where you can go through those rules of engagement or rules for the use of force, but there's an inauguration, and Vice President Biden has got to, make his way to the White House at some point. Now, clearly, there's not going to be a parade or anything this year, but I just want to make sure I'm asking all of those questions as well as you're asking those questions as well, and that we get real answers about them. So that's basically what we're trying to do to make sure that everybody knows that business is going to get taken care of. And I'm not here to be a tough guy, but I am here to say, if you're messing with this process, if you want to try to attempt to kill and members of Congress or anything like that, then you need to be handled accordingly.
Great.
Thank you, Congressman. I appreciate it.
The next question goes to George Nelson from the Business Journal.
Hey, George.
Congressman, how are you doing this afternoon? Good. Thanks for talking to us. One real quick question, then something on the National Guard. First, were you contained with the Congresswoman who tested positive for the coronavirus? Or were you sheltering with the Congresswoman who had tested positive for the coronavirus?
I was in that room for a period of time. I don't remember seeing her, so I don't think I was necessarily close enough. And I'm going to get a test tomorrow just to be sure.
Now, as far as the National Guard, how far out are they reaching for National Guard troops, and how concerned, or what issues does that bring up, considering that we're hearing reports today that there are demonstrations planned in all 50 state capitals leading up to and on Inauguration Day?
Yeah, well, there are, I believe, over 300,000+ National Guard members throughout the country. Maybe more than that. We can get you the specifics on that. But there's adequate numbers to protect, state capitals and other things, as well as, lend, members to come to Washington, D.C. I think all 50 states are engaged. I know that the National Guard Bureau had a call, I think yesterday or the day before, with all 50 states. As I said, the states are being very generous with whatever support that we would need, but they also have things in their own state. But I think they're more than they have more than adequate force power to be able to take care of all of those issues. It may, as I said, it may interrupt some of the stuff that's happening with the vaccine. In the vaccine distribution. Every state's doing this differently, but in many states, the National Guard are involved in some capacity in trying to facilitate this. And from what I'm hearing, that may be affected a little bit.
Next question's from Caitlin Emma from Politico.
Hi, Congressman. Thank you so much for taking my question. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
Earlier, I know you said there is no evidence, you don't have any direct evidence of a quote unquote, inside job, and, 2 officers have been suspended. It sounds like 1 has possibly been arrested. That's a little unclear. My colleagues are hearing that as many as 15 incidences with Capitol Police officers are currently under investigation. Is that also what you're hearing? And do you have any idea of what the nature of those instances are? I mean, is it that they're helping the rioters in those cases, or is it maybe more general than that?
Yeah, I have not heard. I have heard that there are a number of investigations about that, about 10 to 15, but have no clue as to the level of investigation that's going on. The most important part in this, for our purposes, I think here today, are to know that the interim chief is taking aggressive action within the department to find out if there was any facilitation or help. And that's important for everybody to know, because I think there are a lot of people that are worried about that, given some of the videos. And we have every right to ask those questions. No one needs to feel bad about asking those questions. And we need to get to the bottom of it. And I think that from what I can see, at least at this point, from the visibility I have right now, is that the chief and the heads of leaders, I guess, of the department are looking into that.
Next question goes to Justin Dennis from Honing Matters.
Hey, Congressman, thanks for taking the time to speak with us.
Yep.
You earlier mentioned transparency issues with the Capitol Police as part of your committee work. Is there anything looking back at your recent work that now you may have more context about what happened January 6th? And also, do you know if authorities identified or been reviewing platforms where it appears others are planning more hostilities next week? Can you share anything you're learning from looking at where these posts are happening?
Yeah, appreciate that. Nothing on the transparency issue, that I think we can't find out that we maybe would have known beforehand. Like I said, we've had multiple chair people of a variety of different committees talk to the chief, talk to the sergeant at arms, and we're just given assurances that didn't turn out to be accurate. So we were having communication with them. So to be determined, I guess, if we could have known something back then. Most of the issues around transparency with the Capitol Police have been particular incidences that they had over the years that we were trying to institute some reforms that we were able to get through the House version of the bill that got stripped out by the Senate. And so we're going to continue to push some of those reforms. And what was the second question?
Let me pull Justin back here.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. Thank you. The other question was have you been learning anything from these platforms where others appear to be coordinating more hostilities for next week? You've been looking at those. Can you share anything?
Yeah. I don't have anything more than you probably know or see, or that your friends are texting you or emailing to you, or that you see on social media. And obviously there's a lot to be concerned about, and all of this information, clearly it's open source information. It's making its way to the FBI and the Secret Service, and they see it as well. And so that's what ends up driving a lot of the numbers of about exactly how many guardsmen we need and how many states need to be involved, and all of that is being driven by what's happening with the intel. But a lot of it, again, is open sourced, and we're seeing it, and we're concerned about it, and we're gonna adequately address it.
Next question goes to Niv Ellis from The Hill.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you doing this. I wanted to ask, Mayor Muriel Bowser of DC has basically told people to stay away from the inauguration, to participate in it virtually. Do you share that view that people should avoid attending the inauguration?
I mean, I don't see any reason why you should come. To me, it's an event that obviously with COVID and everything else, we were planning on having a much more reduced inaugural. So just for that reason alone, I would recommend that people stay at home. But there's really, given all of the activity in the last week and all of the activity that seems to be planned for the coming days, I don't see any real reason to show up. And I think that it would provide law enforcement a clear picture of who's there if the crowd numbers are reduced, provide for more clarity, reduction in confusion, for them to be able to have some visibility as to what they're dealing with. So I would certainly recommend staying home. And I know there's not a whole lot of tickets. I still get people texting me, "Hey, can I get 8 inaugural tickets?" And I'm like, no, you can't. There not going to be a lot of tickets, so there's not going to be a big crowd there at all. And I think we need to take the advice of the law enforcement, which I think is probably the same advice that the mayor's given.
Next up, we have Danielle with WFMJ.
Hi, Congressman. Danielle Cotterman here.
Hi, Danielle.
Kind of 2 questions. First, you mentioned the need for and plans already being discussed to have a significant number of National Guardsmen at the inauguration. Now, just before this call, I happened to give the press person for Ohio's National Guard a call, and she said at this point, Ohio's National Guard had not been contacted to be involved in DC or even to provide any services at the state capitol. Is that surprising to you? Is that something that maybe should be taking place, or are we just getting these troops from other states?
Yeah, well, basically what they do, because it's most convenient, is to tap into the region surrounding the area where you would need the National Guard. So that would be East Coast, going even up into New Jersey and New York, which can provide an ample number of guardsmen. So I think my understanding is there was a call with everybody. Not everybody was actually activating people to come down to DC. There's a significant number, I will tell you, that that have been activated and that are either in DC or on their way to DC from those surrounding states. And if we need more, then you'll see, the Ohios and Kentuckys and moving further south into maybe North and South Carolina, getting tapped into to bring people in. And that's usually the process that they use. And I think for our purposes here, that enough can be generated from the surrounding region. As far as the state goes,